Hello, Oliver. How are you? Get a little situated here. We can roll up and get going. And make sure that I'm live. Well, okay. I know I must be live because I am seeing comments there. Although I always like to try this really quickly and make sure that I can see it from my own screen, because I'm kind of anal retentive like that. But other than that, we shouldn't have to wait long. There we go. All right. So make sure that all right. Let me get my drink going. This is, as advertised, the impromptu Saturday night Atheist special. Just kind of seeing how things go tonight. I was going to go out, watch the game, then didn't feel like doing that, so screw it. You might as well live stream, huh? Get myself a drink going, and we will be ready to go. So, as you can see, I have a little poll up here. We'll wait to see if others join us before we trigger any results in the poll. But I see that you have thrown in your vote there, Oliver. So I appreciate that. Yeah, that's pretty funny. Anyone who was with us during last Tuesday's regular live stream, you'll remember the saga of Matthew. And after all of that, then it was kind of made clear that despite him telling us that the earth is a sphere, which is a very specific term, that you shouldn't use that haphazardly if you don't really know what a sphere is or if you don't agree with it. Turns out after he had lied and said that I had slurred him on air, and we had proved that wrong, then we saw that he has a flat earther video on his own channel, which it's a whole bunch of AI BS, but it's just a gish gallop of the most ridiculous, non-thinking so-called points in favor of flat eartherism. It's depending upon your viewpoint, it's either absolutely hilarious or it's horrible, which is why I didn't want to just decide that, hey, this is what we're doing tonight, So we'll see. We'll see if anyone else has any dissenting viewpoints on that, and then we'll go from there. Hey, Demented Engineer, how are you doing? Good to see you. So we're just getting set up here on our impromptu live stream tonight. Throw a vote in the poll there, Engineer, if you like to tell me what we should do tonight. Like I said, I'm going to give a few other people a chance to kind of pile in. So we'll probably go through some comments first, but that doesn't mean we have to do that as the choice for the evening. So we'll probably start with that just to kind of burn a little time here and go through some fun things, and then we'll figure out what we're doing for the bulk of the live stream. Tonight's unpaid sponsor is Svedka Blue Raspberry Vodka. So once again, Svedka, if you'd like to throw me some dollars, I would appreciate that, because right now they're getting all of this amazing value being sponsored on my channel without having to pay me anything. Okay, so yeah, Demented says Flurfer sounds lulzy, but comments are always good. Yeah, so we'll probably end up pulling up the Flurfer video. That's probably going to be a lot of fun. But like I said, let me get a few more. Let me go through a few comments here, and then we'll kind of once we get a few more people in, then we'll see if we're going to start in on the Flurfer stuff or not. So let me pull up my screen over here, and we'll kind of go through. Had a lot of not negative comments, but positive or interesting thoughts, additional comments on the videos this week. So feel free to check those out. And let me see here. Sorry, just kind of had a few things going on. I like Ethics Over Faith. Religion is a vestigial organ. It helped early humans survive, but now it's mostly just gets infected. Absolutely, very true. Unfortunately, I don't know if I can really call it vestigial, because if you got rid of a vestigial organ, like genetically, if you could remove it from the species so that no new organisms were built or were born with the vestigial organ, the vestigial organ at that point would not come back. And I hate to say this, but I think that even if you could wipe the slate clean right now, even if you could just get rid of all the religions, get rid of all the holy texts, get rid of the Bibles and the churches and all of that, even if you wiped everyone's brain, while we probably would not have religion coming back in quite the same way that it is today, I don't have much faith in the idea that religion would truly go away, or let me rephrase that. I don't have much faith in the idea right now, at least in the current state of humanity, that religion would not come back. It wouldn't come back in the same form, because as Ricky Gervais so helpfully points out, if we lost all of the science books, we'd get all the science knowledge back eventually, right? But if we lost all of the religion, the religious text, the religion, the churches and all of that stuff, I think we would get religion back. It may not come back as strong. It certainly would not come back in exactly the same way. We wouldn't have the same names. We wouldn't have the same holy texts. We wouldn't have we might have entirely different concepts of God. But I'm not confident right now in the state of humanity that if you got religion off the docket, some people wouldn't reinstate it. Yes, the follow-up comment there is some of the crazies need it to keep them from killing us all. Well, I would argue that some of the crazies are using it to kill us all too, although usually not in an overtly murderous fashion. Usually it's much more underhanded in terms of trying to undermine human rights, etc. Oh, I like this. It says, Ricky is the reason I realized I am an agnostic atheist. That's pretty cool. People talk a lot about new atheism. It's become passé now, and now people are saying, it's dead or whatever. Dawkins and Hitchens and all them. And they certainly have some problematic shit going on with people like Dawkins. But you don't often hear Ricky spoken of as someone who maybe shows people the light of atheism or agnosticism. So it's kind of cool that talking, hearing him speak was enough to kind of trigger some of the neurons for you. So that's pretty awesome. All right, so like I said, we'll continue to look at the poll here. Actually, it looks like for the moment the comments are winning out anyway. So as long as the comments are winning out, we will continue to keep going through the comments. We have a grand total of 7 votes so far, but we'll keep seeing how that poll runs out. So first comment that I wanted to highlight was from the Fenord video, which continues to do really well. Hey, thank you, Ethics Over Faith. I appreciate it. Thanks for stopping in. Hope to see you again soon. Says you liked and subscribed, so I appreciate you very much. So the comment here is, Fenord predates this trilogy in both concept and word. Earlier writings inspired its inclusion in these writings. I am rather sure it goes back to at least the mid-60s, might even be older than that. So I won't bring up all of the comments that were similar to this one, but I did receive at least 3 or 4 or 5 different comments on the same idea. And they're all correct. In the video, even though the video is done very well and people seem to enjoy it very much, one of the things that I said is that the term Fenord comes to us from the Illuminatus trilogy. And that's not actually correct. The Illuminatus trilogy plays off of a lot of like 50s and especially 60s counterculture, subculture kind of concepts. And one of them that it plays off of heavily is the Principia Discordia. And the Fnord comes from the Principia Discordia. If you don't know what that is, might be a fun video sometime in the future to discuss. Although I would have to do some reading on it myself, because it's a whole rabbit hole of it's like this religion, but it's not a religion. It's like a sarcastic kind of joke religion, but the key to it being a really good sarcastic religion is that you don't actually admit that it's not a real religion. So it's like, and it's much more conspiratorial than other religions, and it seems much more nonsensical on some levels. But that is where the term Fnord actually first came from. The Illuminatus trilogy that I referenced in the Fnord video plays heavily from concepts such as the Principia Discordia. But I just wanted to publicly acknowledge, even though these people leaving the comments probably won't watch this live stream, but I wanted it to be publicly on record that I have acknowledged that they are correct, and I misspoke when I said that the Fnord comes to us originally from the Illuminatus trilogy. Although I imagine a lot of people who read the Illuminatus trilogy were probably introduced to the concept for the first time in that series of books. But that doesn't change the fact that Axiom of Discord here and a number of other people are correct, that it did not come from the Illuminatus trilogy. James, you should have been here last Tuesday, because we were actually, this is one of your favorite subjects, I know, and we were actually talking about this. Me and Anka from Moscow were talking about this, so I feel bad that for someone who leaves this type of comment, I feel like you leave this comment every time you visit the channel, and I don't mean that as a slight, but you should have been here Tuesday, because we were actually discussing it. I even said at one point that I should start like a Christian thirst trap OnlyFans for like closeted gay Christian men with foot fetishes, where I wear like Jesus robes and I wash my feet, or have someone wash my feet in the video, all the videos. You're like, hey, you naughty Christian, watch me wash my feet, you know? The sad part is I would probably make more money doing that than I would make doing my YouTube channel. But, you know, there's only so many projects I can take on at one time. So Ishak Newton says, please shout out my bro Dixon Mayaz. So I don't know who Dixon is, but shout out to your bro Dixon Mayaz. Although sometimes, you know, some of these are like trolling things. Like sometimes you find out that the person they want you to shout out is, I don't know, a pedophile or something, or some horrible person. And, you know, then they'll be like, ha ha, the atheist shouted out this person. But okay, I don't know who your bro Dixon Mayaz is, but sure, you know, I'm down with it. And then yes, this who spend all day with 12 men. Jesus is gay, love to make love to men who spend all day with men. I mean, I think that there are more convincing homosexual implied relationships in the Bible, and the big one that I always would point to is David and Jonathan. I think that it's not even very subtle, but I understand where you're coming from with that. And being a huge ally and fan of LGBT rights, I certainly have no problem with anyone pointing out any things in the Bible that seem to be a little things that make you go, All right, looking back at our comments, this one was funny. I don't think this person was trying to be obtuse, but you'll see this in a second. this person says, this is Multi1 replying to the Fenord video. And they say, the problem with the title and concept of the video is that this seems to only refer to Christianity and not most to all of religion. I am convinced all religion is detrimental to society. So clearly, Multi1 and I probably have a lot in common. But I couldn't help but notice they start this off by saying that the title and concept of the video is that it seems to only refer to Christianity. Well, notice the title. The title is How Religion Trains You Not to Think. How Religion Trains You Not to Think. And then in parentheses, Fenord. So it doesn't say how Christianity trains you not to think. It says how religion trains you not to think. I don't know how the title can be any clearer. And then I know it's kind of small there on the screen, but the thumbnail doesn't mention Christianity or religion. It just says, can you see the Fenords? But the fact that it says that the title and concept of the video seems to only refer to Christianity when the title clearly says how religion trains you to not to think makes me think that maybe you're not really thinking. maybe you should have thought better through this, because it doesn't seem like you're actually doing the braining on this one. But okay, you can lead a horse to logic, but you can't make him think, right? So okay, we'll see how that goes. Now, I didn't sit there and go through the video itself to see how many times I refer to Christianity versus religion. I think I refer to religion a lot in the video, but I'm sure that I also referred to Christianity a lot because I've mentioned this multiple times on the channel before, that oftentimes, a lot of times I end up targeting Christianity because I was a Christian for 40 years. So it's what is nearest and dearest to my heart. And I mean that in the most ironic way. It's also, I live in the US and I live in the American South. So it is, in my humble opinion, seeped into the culture here, and it's seeped into the politics. And there are a lot of times when I say Christian this or Christianity that, and you could absolutely usually apply those things to religion at large, or at least theism, because a lot of the critiques that I would bring against Christianity really are theistic critiques. I don't have nearly as many problems with non-theistic religions, but with theistic religions, a lot of times they all seem to have the same downfall. The same problems keep cropping up over and over again. So if the content of the video was too specifically geared toward Christianity when it should have been toward religion as a whole, fine, that may be possible. I didn't feel like actually, again, going up through the video word by word or looking at the transcript and counting up the number of times I said Christian versus religion or vice versa. But the fact that he says that the title also seems to refer only to Christianity, there's no Christianity in the title. It just says how religion trains you not to think. So I don't know if they really thought that comment through very well. They could have been a little more precise in their wording, but nevertheless, I appreciate the view. You know. Okay, so continuing on through comments. So I wanted to bring this up because this is admittedly becoming a bigger theme in my comments. I feel like people are getting more hypersensitized to this. So Adrian Daniel Gard says the video, this is again referring to the Fenord video. The video is amazing and probably in my top 5 critique religion videos. But please tone down the ChatGPT slang. I almost feel sick from the sheer volume of it's not this, it's that, and it may not be wrong, right, but here's the thing, etc. I guess I have to mention this for anyone on the live stream today, anyone who may go back and watch this later. I'll probably have to do another standalone video on just this topic, but people have gotten to the point where they have no fucking idea what is or is not AI anymore, which is only going to get worse. And that's okay. I'm not mad at you for that. But then people put comments like this, like, please tone down the ChatGPT slang. Well, first of all, I wrote the fucking script for this video myself, and I didn't use ChatGPT for any part of this video. Now, I will freely admit that in the past, I have used at times AIs, usually Claude, but I've used ChatGPT, I've used Gemini to help me put together lists and to do preliminary research. You know, sometimes I'll say, give me all of the verses that pertain to this topic, right? So I use AI not just to generate images, but I use AI sometimes to help me craft scripts and content, but I write the scripts myself. If the verbiage that I'm using in my scripts reminds you of ChatGPT, I'm sorry, but not. Like, I can't just sit here. Hey, Anka, I can't just sit here and write my own damn script and then worry about how many phrases in my own terminology are too similar to what you think maps to AI usage. And I'm seeing this over and over again now. I'm going to bring up a few other examples of this from the comments because people are starting to get fucking paranoid. I've had people on this channel accuse me of being AI, like me personally of being AI. I've had people now with this comment accuse me of, I guess this is kind of an accusation of ChatGPT having written the script, and it did not. Of course, I have people who get mad because of the images, and I will freely tell you that, yes, I use ChatGPT to generate images sometimes on some videos, but sometimes I don't, and people often can't tell the fucking difference. So I know this isn't going to stop because this seems to be a touch point right now for the interwebs. It's getting a hotter and hotter comment or topic. But if you think that I'm just going to stop using AI in any way, shape, or form, in any capacity when I'm doing my channel, you're just wrong. I mean, you can unsubscribe, and somebody else did that this week, and that's fine. But newsflash for you. If you think that there's some great creator that you love who doesn't use AI at all, you're probably wrong. I can't tell you for certain that they don't because, they, who knows what they do in their own time when you're not seeing their process. But a lot of people, even if they claim not to use AI, I've seen on some channels where I'm like, yeah, I can tell sometimes that something is from AI. But then again, just like this person who thinks that my verbiage is coming from ChatGPT and is wrong, the simple fact is that more often than not, you don't actually know when something is from AI. People have gotten used to in the last 3 or 4 years, like the shitty images from Midjourney, and they've gotten used to a certain aesthetic that you normally see from AI. But the simple fact is not all AI generated things follow those shitty aesthetics. So there's only so much that you can do to combat this. So let me see here. I want to acknowledge this question here from Dade. So it says, what was the last book you read and would you recommend it? So first of all, I have to preface this, Dade, by saying that I admittedly do not read in the old school traditional sense nearly as much as I wish that I did anymore. I used to read voraciously when I was younger. And now this is going to just, if you didn't already know that I'm old, this is going to prove it right here. Just reading a book puts me to sleep. Even when I'm up and awake in the middle of the day, I'll say, ooh, let me do some reading. And I'll pull up a book and I'll sit there and start reading the book. And I get like 2 or 3 pages into it. And I think, oh man, I want to take a nap. And I know that sounds so sad. But that being said, I mean, it's not like I've stopped reading. And I can give you a specific answer to this. The last book that I read was the Cryptonomicon by Neal Stephenson, which is also why I have on my desk here Snow Crash by Neal Stephenson, which has sat here now for like a year and I haven't read it yet. I haven't even cracked it. Okay. So I'm admitting that I don't get to read in a traditional sense nearly as much as I wish that I did when I was younger. Now, of course, I'm reading constantly on the web. Some people might think that's reading, some people won't. But you know, I'm not just reading Twitter feeds and Instagram. I'm reading articles, sometimes lengthy articles. Sometimes I'm reading papers that are published online. So the stuff that I'm reading online sometimes is, I would say, you know, of a higher caliber at times. But it's not the same as saying, oh, look at these amazing 20 books that I've read in the last year. But the Cryptonomicon and Neal Stephenson, I think he's an amazing author, which is why I have Snow Crash there. The Cryptonomicon is pretty interesting. I've heard people say that it's not the best book to get introduced to Neal Stephenson on, although it was for me. It's kind of dense. It plays out over like 3 time periods, and there's some funky stuff going on there with people. I won't spoil it for you, but there's some funky stuff going on with people who don't seem to age, and the people presenting themselves in different time periods, and then the way that these time periods tend to kind of reflect back on each other. I know that's a really confusing description, but I would highly recommend that book. My favorite author, hands down, is always been, I'm saying my favorite author, hands down, is Philip K. Dick. I adore Philip K. Dick. So, and I still have more of his stuff I need to read that I have not read yet, but I'm definitely going to do more of that. And then Dave says, do you prefer fiction to nonfiction? I admittedly don't read fiction, and that's not at all a flex, but it's the truth. I think because of the amount of time I'm on the web reading nonfiction, you know, researching stuff, and whenever possible, trying to actually read meaningful things on the web that inform my view on things or help me to write scripts. I think that that's all the more reason why I tend to read more fiction in my personal life. I've been a writer, you know, I'm some sort for my entire life, and I've always written fiction. I usually write sci-fi. So yeah, when I'm reading on my own, you know, just for pleasure, it's almost always fiction. It's usually some form of science fiction, a little bit of fantasy, but mostly fiction. I don't think it's a flex to say that, because I think that it's pretty cool to be able to dive into all of these nonfiction topics and grow your brain in that regard. The last nonfiction book I read was Guns, Germs, and Steel. That's a really good book. Guns, Germs, and Steel by Jared Diamond. I would recommend that. Now, since it came out, it kind of took the world by storm a little bit when it first came out. And since then, it's gotten a little bit of scholarly pushback on some of the concepts, because it comes across as being very scholarly, but like so much of Philip K. Dick is science fiction, but like so much of books that come out to a general audience that purport to talk about non-fictional topics, they tend to be seen by the layperson as being very high-minded and intelligent, but the scholars in that field tend to break it down more and say, wait a minute, some of your conclusions aren't right here. But I think that Guns, Germs, and Steel is incredibly useful for things that we talk about on this channel. Because, for example, this talking point, which has now become so fucking prevalent amongst Christian apologists about how Christianity is responsible for every good thing that's happened in the world. They're responsible for all science, and they're responsible for all civilization, and they're responsible for donuts with holes in them, and they're responsible for sliced bread. I mean, you guys have heard this shit. And Guns, Germs, and Steel does, I think, a pretty good job of breaking down why certain societies over time have flourished and others have not. It used to be that the primary explanation for why one region flourished and the other did not, usually that came down to racism, right? Because we would say, oh, Germans, Italians or whatever, they flourished because, and whether they say this out loud or not, they were usually implying that you had this higher Aryan thing going on. And then they'd say, oh, people in, Indonesia or Africa or South America, they did not flourish because they're savages, because they're brown people, because they don't have the mental capacity, blah, blah, blah. Just a whole bunch of racism. So usually it was overt, the way that they would say it. But even when they didn't say it like that, it would be clearly implied. And Guns, Germs, and Steel does a good job of breaking down why certain regions, by our Western standard today, excelled further than other regions. And it's not because, the brown people didn't know how to, create a society. It's because of a lot of factors like what species of animals they had available to them in those regions. Because they didn't, for example, they did not domesticate many animals in North and South America. They did domesticate animals, but compared to the scale at which they domesticated animals in the Middle East and Asia and Europe, it's the scale is much lower in North and South America. Well, there's a reason for that, because the species that were native in North and South America, most of them don't lend themselves to domestication as well as some of the species that were native to Asia and Europe. I could go off on that for quite a while, but it would get kind of boring if it hasn't already. So, but I appreciate the questions there, Dad. I don't think I missed any of yours, so I want to make sure I didn't skip any of yours there, but thank you. And then Demented Engineer. I like you, Demented Engineer, so I'm going to be nice about this. Like you had to ask what genre Philip K. Dick is. I'm so insulted. Being a sci-fi fan that I am. But I realize, I guess the whole world is not populated with sci-fi fans. So I will forgive you for this today. But I need you to do penance. I need you to beg the sci-fi gods for forgiveness and bone up on some Philip K. Dick. You don't have to go read everything, but yeah. So I see Andy's talking about, do androids dream of electric sheep, which is the story, which was the basis for Blade Runner. And he's got Philip K. Dick has his imprint all over modern sci-fi. And by modern, I mean the last 30, 40 years. Total Recall, which I know the original Total Recall is getting long in the tooth, right? But Total Recall was based upon a Philip K. Dick story. There are a lot of really cool sci-fi lineages that trace themselves back to Philip K. Dick. He's also an incredibly fascinating individual who essentially went fucking crazy, became this weird sort of born-again Christian, but not in the way that we think of Christians, in this weird hippie crazy, too much acid kind of Christian. I won't try to explain all that here other than to say you should just go look it up. It's quite interesting. Okay, so going back then to comments. Charles says Asimov. I read some Asimov. I read a good amount of Asimov. I don't have the love for Asimov that other people do in terms of as an author. I mean, I have respect for him because he wrote some of the seminal works of sci-fi, the sci-fi canon. But when I actually sit down and read what Asimov wrote, some of it's a little tough for me to read, but just because some of it I don't feel is written that well. But I know that sounds crazy coming from someone who's not a grandfather of sci-fi to claim that. But back to comments. Yeah, yeah. Anka's like, yeah, back to comments. He's like, damn it, stop this shit. Okay. So we talked about everyone's panicked about ChatGPT. Okay. And there's only so much I can do about that, people. I mean, at a certain point, all I can do is make my videos. All right. So this is on the most recent one, the Christian homophobia with chords. And Sovereign Seville says, I'm sorry, this kid is an idiot. His lack of musical knowledge is astounding, considering the musical instruments he has in the background. So I wanted to bring this up because I actually got numerous comments on this video that all are under the same umbrella, the same concept. So I definitely had to acknowledge this. If you guys watched the video, you know that this pastor spent a lot of time in this video beating up this really crappy analogy with music. And his shitty argument boiled down to basically, look, there are certain sounds that sound nice to our ears because they're naturally beautiful, or as he kept calling them, objectively beautiful. And then after he did that, then he wanted to use that crappy analogy as a way to say, and this is why gay is bad. Because just like some notes sound bad to your ear, well, gay just sounds bad to your ear or whatever. I mean, if you guys watched the video, you know what I'm talking about. And if you didn't watch the video, I don't want to sit here and rehash the whole thing. But he made a number of musical analogies. And I will be the first one to admit to you that I love music, but I've never been a musician at all. I don't play a single instrument. I have great admiration for the people that are musicians. I live blocks away from incredible live music, during all 7 days of the week, all 365 days a year. I could go there right now and start listening to live music 3 blocks from my house. But as much as I appreciate live music, I don't know anything. I don't understand how to read music. I don't understand, how some of these chord progressions work and things like this. So I didn't know enough to critique. Of course, I critiqued the hell out of this guy's content. I should put this on the screen here, the comment I was talking about. I didn't know enough to critique, I critiqued his really bad, bigoted attacks on the gay community, but I did not know enough to even understand or critique his misguided understandings of music. But I had multiple people write in the comments and say, even from a music perspective, this guy just doesn't really know what he's talking about. They pointed out to me, like, he was talking about the keys that you have on a piano, and apparently, like, one of the keys in like this third is purposely a little bit off the way that they tune it. And they said in the comments why they do that, but I don't want to sit here and try to spit that back at you and be incorrect. But also people pointed out that in other cultures, there are entirely different progressions or notes or chords that other cultures consider to be resonant, that are common in other in the music from those cultures. So, of course, I knew when I went to the video that this whole idea that there are right notes and wrong notes is fucking ridiculous and sad. And I pointed that out absolutely in the video. But I had many people who helped along by saying, this guy doesn't even know what he's talking about with regard to music. It's really quite a joke. So, yay for bigoted homophobes who don't even know how to do their own music analogies. So let me acknowledge here, we got a super chat here from Constellation Pegasus. Thank you, friend. I appreciate that very much. They say, any opinions on Proverbs chapter 8? Some claim Asherah is being described, and here it's feminine. It's been a while since I pulled up Proverbs for anything. So first of all, I'm going to admit to you that I can't tell you off the top of my head, although I've read the Bible multiple times before. And you guys probably know that, like now with the areas that we've gone through in Godfrey Bible Study, there's a lot more of those things from Godfrey Bible Study that I can tell you exactly what's in each chapter, because when you write down notes before you do a recording, and then when you record it on camera and you talk through it, it tends to stick it in your head a lot more than no matter how many times you just sit down on your couch and read it. So when I get through Proverbs in Godfrey Bible Study, I will probably have more of these things off the top of my head. But let's pull this up here and see what Proverbs chapter 8 is talking about. So it says, the gifts of wisdom. Does not wisdom call and understanding raise her voice? On the heights, beside the way at the crossroads, she takes her stand. Beside the gates in front of the town, at the entrance of the portals, she cries out. To you, O people, I call, and my cry is to all who live. O simple ones, learn prudence, acquire intelligence, you who lack it. Hear, for I will speak noble things, and from my lips will come what is right. For my mouth will utter truth. Wickedness is an abomination to my lips. All the words of my mouth are righteous. There is nothing twisted or crooked in them. They are all straight to one who understands, and right to those who find knowledge. Take my instruction instead of silver and knowledge rather than choice gold. For wisdom is better than jewels, and all that you may desire cannot compare with her. I, wisdom, live with prudence, and I attain knowledge and discretion. The fear of the Lord is hatred of evil. Pride and arrogance and the way of evil and perverted speech I hate. I have good advice and sound wisdom. I have insight, I have strength. By me kings reign and rulers decree what is just. By me rulers rule and nobles all who govern rightly. I love those who love me, and those who seek me diligently find me. Riches and honor are with me, and enduring wealth and prosperity. My fruit is better than gold, even fine gold, and my yield than choice silver. I walk in the way of righteousness along the paths of justice, endowing with wealth those who love me and filling their treasuries. So I don't know if you want me to read all the rest of that too. Well, go ahead. We'll finish the rest of this too, because I'll give you my thoughts on this. It doesn't take us long to go through a whole chapter when it's Proverbs, right? So, the Lord created me at the beginning of his work, the first of his acts of long ago. Ages ago I was set up at the first, before the beginning of the earth. When there were no depths, I was brought forth. When there were no springs abounding with water, before the mountains had been shaped, before the hills I was brought forth. When he had not yet made earth and fields, or the world's first bits of soil. When he established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep. When he made firm the skies above, when he established the fountains of the deep, when he assigned to the sea its limit, so that the waters might not transgress his command, when he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was beside him like a master worker, and I was daily his delight, playing before him always, playing in his inhabited world, and delighting in the human race. And now, my children, listen to me. Happy are those who keep my ways. Hear instruction and be wise, and do not neglect it. Happy is the one who listens to me, watching daily at my gates, waiting beside my doors. For whoever finds me finds life and obtains favor from the Lord. But those who miss me injure themselves, and all who hate me love death. So the question that came from this was, any opinions on Proverbs chapter 8? Some claim Asherah is being described here. It's feminine. So I want to start by saying that, like, unlike other areas of the Bible where I can sit here and say, okay, I know what the story is on this, I don't have like a Dan McClellan moment to give you on this where I can say, here's the basis or here's what scholars say. I don't want to over present my, I don't want to get it over my skis and tell you that I know something that I don't. So this is kind of based off an ad hoc reading right now. Clearly, I think the key here that you're saying with Asherah is that this is constantly referring to her. And you can tell what's happening in the passage is that they have personified wisdom and they have chosen to identify wisdom in the feminine, right? So I understand the question. I will say that there are a few things in here that, as a layperson, give me pause right away as to thinking that this is Asherah. One, in other areas of the Bible where it does seem to be having some sort of reference to Asherah, there's usually a references there to a pole. I'm not saying that you have to be referencing the Asherah pole in order to be talking about Asherah, but there doesn't seem to be any reference to that here whatsoever. So that's an argument from silence. So I'm not going to say that means that this is not Asherah. I'm just going to point that thing out, that one item out first. The second thing I will say is it is interesting that they've personified wisdom and chosen to identify it in the feminine, because so much of the rest of the Bible is everything is in masculine form, right? That being said, I don't know. I would need to look up from the Hebrew, because I do know that in Hebrew, especially ancient Hebrew, but I guess even modern Hebrew is like this. Hebrew is one of those terms, or excuse me, it's one of those languages that is hyper-gendered, meaning like almost everything in Hebrew has a gender, not just men or women or kings or queens. Those have obvious genders to the English or Western ear. But if you're familiar with other languages, some languages tend to gender many things. In some languages, like Hebrew, from what I understand, gender almost everything. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because the real question I would ask is, in the Hebrew language, if I'm just referring to wisdom, is there a gender that's generally assigned to that word to just a plain Hebrew speaker? Because if the natural gendering of that word is female, then that would, of course, explain a lot about why they have chose to personify wisdom in the feminine sense here in this chapter. Still going on from that, there are other thoughts that I have about this. When it talks about, let me find this here. So there are a couple things that make me think that this is not Asherah. Okay, first of all, they're ascribing some things here that you would expect to be only ascribed in the Hebrew tradition to Yahweh. So now I know you could say, well, maybe this passage came from some time before they had fully collapsed down to monotheism. But anytime I see something that is ascribing things to another God that we would normally consider to be only the purview of Yahweh, that at least gives me some doubt as to whether or not this is really supposed to be another God. Because it says, like, by me kings reign and rulers decree what is just. I mean, you could say that by wisdom rulers decree what is just. That makes sense. But by me kings reign, I mean, you could understand the analogy here that by wisdom kings reign, right? You'd hope that a king reigns in wisdom. And yet, if you wanted to say that this is Asherah, I don't, that feels like it's kind of trampling on what you would normally think of as being the purview of Yahweh, because throughout the rest of the book, Yahweh is the one who genuinely determines who reigns and who does not. More importantly, it says here at the part of this, the beginning of the second part, the Lord, which in the original reading would say Yahweh. Yahweh created me at the beginning of his work, the first of his acts of long ago. I'm not familiar, even if we said, okay, maybe this is an ancient reference to the divine council, maybe this is an ancient reference to Yahwism, which existed before Judaism and was polytheistic, or at least henotheistic. So if you want to assume that this is a passage that comes down to us from that far older time, then you also have to grapple with the fact that it says here that Yahweh created me at the beginning of his work. And I'm not familiar with any tradition from the divine council or from Yahwism that indicates that Yahweh actually created Asherah. Now, if I'm incorrect on that, by all means, someone smack me down and correct me. But I don't think that under any tradition, under any aspect of the Hebrew tradition, even under the old traditions when they had Yahwism and they had henotheism, etc., I don't think that they ever were really implying that Yahweh created Asherah. In fact, the hierarchy that came down to us from the old pantheon was you had El and Asherah, right? And Yahweh was their son, one of their sons. Or at least, I don't know if the tradition literally says that El was the father of Yahweh, but Yahweh was absolutely a rung below or a tier below El and Asherah. And then what happened in the slow coalescing of the religion over time, along with this syncretism that they gained from outside religions, is that they started saying that they wanted to be monotheistic and they didn't want these other gods, and they wanted their God, the God that they had adopted as their patron God, which was Yahweh. They wanted Yahweh to be the God. So when that happened, Yahweh started taking on the characteristics, not just of a storm god, but also the characteristics that were previously ascribed to El. So for this reason, amongst the others that I've mentioned, it feels like a stretch to me to look at this passage and claim that even in an ancient reading that maybe this was somehow referring to Asherah, because it would seem to be inverting the old school idea of the gods to say that Yahweh created Asherah, because that wasn't, if we're going back to when people believed in El and Asherah, then if anything, it would have been El and Asherah creating Yahweh. And then for a time, there seems to have been a time when El sort of went away and got subsumed into Yahweh, and then you had Yahweh and Asherah. So I hope that answers your question. I've kind of gone through it like 12 different ways, and it's possible that none of those ways were absolutely hitting your question. But that is certainly how I would interpret this. I would not interpret this as being a reference to Asherah, but I would love to hear from anyone who has more of a scholarly bent on it. Yeah, but thank you for the super chat. I appreciate that very much. Okay, back to comments. Right after I refresh my drink. Because, ladies and gentlemen, a sober Adam is an angry Adam. And no one wants that. All right. I need one of my congestion pills here too. Just a second. Okay, back to comments. I am drinking a low-carb Monster. I drink a lot of Monsters. In conjunction with the Svedka Blue Raspberry Vodka. They are the unpaid sponsor of the evening. It's quite tasty. I know the energy drinks are not for everyone, but I like the energy drinks with the flavored vodkas. It's kind of yummy. It kind of works well for me. Hey, Michael. Yeah, Michael, I was trying to sneak on here without you seeing. I didn't want you to. I told everyone, I was like, shh, don't tell Michael. So, damn it, you found us. Damn it, somebody told Michael that we're on. Now, clearly this was an impromptu one tonight, as I've been doing the every Tuesday night, and then I've usually been doing an impromptu one some other point during the week, but so this is the impromptu for this week. Going back to comments. And by all means, Constellation Pegasus, like if I did not answer that properly, if you were looking for a different type of answer, I'm more than happy to, expand upon that. If there's some different avenue that you were expecting me to take on that as well. So this comment here is on the homophobia video. It says, meanwhile, my parents can't decide whether they would even want to be invited to a hypothetical wedding I might have one day. Also, that piano analogy made me mad on so many levels. So this, first of all, this is from Lily Manders, and that makes me so sad, that statement. Meanwhile, my parents can't decide whether they would even want to be invited to a hypothetical wedding that I might have one day. So I just wanted to bring this comment up, first of all, because Lily, I'm sorry for you. It sucks that your parents suck ass, and I wish that they did not suck ass, but they do. But there was a weird dichotomy that came up in my mind as I read this, because when you hear queer people talk about, I've heard other queer people say, well, I'm not married, but my parents don't know if they would show up at the wedding, if they would come, if they were invited, etc. There's always two thoughts that go through my mind, and they're kind of strongly competing points. And I guess you can take it either way. Part of me says that if you're not sure if you would want to go to your gay child's wedding when and if they were to get married, I would tell you right now, don't go. Don't go because you're a fucking asshole. And if the reason that you're going to your queer child's wedding is because after thinking about it deeply, you've just decided that you have to go out of some sense of duty or, because you don't want to hurt someone's feelings, then guess what? You're already an asshole. And you really, I can't speak for the people getting married, but you really need to think deeply about whether or not you want to be the asshole who decided to show up at the wedding merely because you thought that you were doing people a favor when you were going to the wedding. If you need to think that way, then you're an asshole. So that's the first thing that goes through my head on that. The other almost opposite thought is that I do understand that sometimes very bigoted people end up realizing how bigoted they are when they have a life event like this in their family where like a gay kid of theirs is getting engaged to be married. So sometimes good things can come from this. Sometimes it could be the trigger that actually leads your asshole parents to realize that maybe they should stop being bigots. So from that perspective, I guess maybe it's good that they're still thinking about whether they would go to your hypothetical wedding at some point down the line. But I would hope that if the time comes when you become engaged and if they still feel in their heart the way that they do about you and your lifestyle, then I would hope that they don't go just because they've decided out of some sense of duty that they have to go, even though they're going to hate it the whole time. Because if you are not cool with queer people and someone invites you to a queer wedding, if you can't go there and actually genuinely enjoy their moment and be joyous with them and be happy for them and not be a judgmental prick in the back of your mind the whole time that you're there, then don't fucking go. Don't show up. It would be far better for you to man the fuck up and tell the people, I'm just not going because I don't support it, and just admit what you are, rather than drag yourself to an event like that. Because here's the deal. You might think that you can drag yourself to that event and you can put on your smiley face and you can act like you support everyone. But people are going to know, especially the people you're close to. They're going to know. They're going to see that you're uncomfortable. They're going to see that you have all these bigoted thoughts running through your head, even if you are smart enough not to let them escape your mouth. They're going to know. So if you can't genuinely see the stupidity in what you're doing in terms of your hatred and your bigotry, then don't go. The only way you should ever go is if you've actually realized, oh, this was a shitty thing for me to think. This is a shitty way for me to be. Okay, next comment. So this is Snow Angel saying, I know this isn't the point of this video, but can I say how gross it is when people realize homophobia is wrong when someone they love comes out? Like, okay, good for you not abandoning your gay loved one, but why did it take someone you love being gay for it to suddenly matter to you? If you were already an adult when it happened, if you were a kid, that's understandable. So this is kind of almost related to the previous comment, right? It's kind of tangentially related as far as, does it take someone coming out for you to suddenly realize that you don't hate gay people? Or does it take one of your gay kids getting married for you to suddenly realize that you don't hate gay people? And I wanted to talk through this quickly because I understand this point and I agree with this point. I will also say that it's hard to speak definitively about this point, for me at least. I respect Snow Angel's point of view because I think it's absolutely accurate and correct. But the simple fact is that sometimes when people have not been exposed to anyone from a certain culture, it's just too easy for them sometimes to fall into bigoted viewpoints. I'm not saying that excuses it, but it just happens sometimes. I mean, you'll see people that grow up in, Western North Dakota, and some of them are racist people because they have racist parents and they grow up in a racist community. Some of them are racist because they grew up in that community and they've never met a black person in their life. Some of them have never met a brown person in their life, And some of those people, when they are actually exposed to a community of people that doesn't look just like them, some of them realize pretty quickly, ooh, some of those things that I said or did were gross. And they suddenly realize that, these things that were easy to pass off just as things you laugh about or whatever, when you were in your small town in Western North Dakota, don't actually hold up to the light of day when you're in any environment other than Western North Dakota. So I'm not saying that excuses being a hateful bigot when you're in Western North Dakota, but I do understand if someone is raised in a certain environment, and I bring this up because I'm using racism as an example, but same thing with gay people, especially when I was growing up, because people were closeted, right? And there were so many people that were closeted. So I always say that for most of my time growing up, I didn't know any gay people. Now, in reality, I probably did know some gay people, right? I probably just didn't know that they were gay. But it wasn't until I was 17, the first time that I actually knew that I knew a gay person. And if my uncle hadn't come out when he did, I wouldn't have known that I knew a gay person until at least several years later. And I was never this horrible, hateful, bigoted guy. Like, I never wanted to run around and find gay people and beat them up or any of that kind of shit. But I certainly enjoyed, throwing around the word faggot all the time because I thought it was funny, and making gay jokes about my friends. And, I did the kind of stuff that was just part and parcel for the environment that I was in. So I'm bringing all this up to say that Snow Angel's point is exactly correct, and it's accurate. Ideally, we shouldn't have to meet a black person to know that, there's no reason to be bigoted against black people. You shouldn't have to meet an Asian person or any other person to realize that. You shouldn't have to meet a gay person in order to know that you should be cool with gay people. Unfortunately, sometimes when you are in a very sheltered environment in terms of the diversity or lack thereof that's around you, sometimes it's hard not to escape. It's hard to escape slipping into those patterns that are presented and imprinted on you from birth. I was lucky, like in my family, there was never any queer hatred, but people in my family never talked about damn those gay people. We never talked about gay people going to hell. But I did grow up in a family that was largely military. My grandfather on my father's side was a command sergeant major. My grandfather on my mother's side was in World War II. And on my father's side, he was in Vietnam and Korea. I have an uncle who graduated West Point. I have another uncle who flew choppers in Nam. I have a cousin who was in Iraq in the Marines. My dad was in the Army. So you get the point here that it was a pretty heavily military influenced family. And I probably don't have to tell you what sort of just default viewpoints permeated my family with regards to gay people, and just the whole idea that anyone out there could be gay or was gay. I mean, there were families out there that were much more overtly hateful than ours. But still, can I sit there and tell you in good faith that we were very open-minded and egalitarian and modern and loving? No, I can't. So all that to say, I'll wrap up the commentary here on this comment. But Snow Angel's point is absolutely correct. The only issue here is that while it's absolutely correct, I think depending upon your background, sometimes you do need to be the gay person to snap you out of your stupidity. Sometimes if you only grew up in a white neighborhood your whole life, maybe you do need to meet a black person to realize that, I was being a racist piece of shit. I mean, it can happen. I know, like, a really good example of this in America too is that, anti-Semitism is really common throughout a lot of America. And in most of America, there are only a few places where there are significant Jewish communities. Now, there's some percentage of Jewish people everywhere. Even if you're in Omaha, Nebraska, there are Jewish people there. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's low. But it's easy to, in many places in America, not really know any Jewish people. So again, if you're in one of these places in America where there aren't many Jewish people, it's easy to, if you have anti-Semitic people around you feeding shit into your brain, it's easy to fall into that if you've never really met a Jewish person in real life. Okay, so next comment. All right, I got a caller coming in here. Let me hit this one comment, Chris, and I'll get to you in just a second. So, because this will be a quick comment. I thought this was funny because on the homophobia video, Aubrey Leon Dolofonsos Dolofonos says, "Who knew you could pastor a church at 15 years old?" So if you guys watched that video, the pastor that I was referring to, he absolutely looks to me like a little kid. Now, I wasn't going to say that in the video because in the video, I would like to reply to their content, their thoughts, their points, and not respond to their looks, their speech patterns, etc. But sometimes it's funny when the viewers do this for me. They put in the comments like, yeah, the guy does look really, really young. And I know that you could be very young. I guess that was interesting to me that she brought up this point because so many times when you look at these people on YouTube that are trying to be like spiritual leaders, and a lot of them are very young, and you can be young and preach the word of God or whatever, that's fine. But when I was growing up, there was always this presumed kind of, this assumption that the people leading you on the word of God had a lot of life experience themselves, that they had a lot of wisdom that they'd gotten through their life, and that they could use that to help craft the words that they were giving to you. Does that mean that the old people's words were better than the young people's? No, probably not. But it is interesting when you see people like that on YouTube that seem to be incredibly young, telling us how we should think about, issues like homosexuality. So let's look at I have a caller here. Chris, are you with us? Chris.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So are you 18?
Oh, sorry, no.
You said no?
Yeah, no.
Okay. I do try to, so the thing here is we're trying to keep this to people who are 18 and up.
Yeah, my bad. My bad.
No worries. I appreciate it. So please come back and talk with us. But thanks, man.
Oh, yeah. God bless you.
Bless you.
God.
Yeah, so sorry to cut you off there, Chris, but I have been trying to remember to ask people if they are 18, because you could have some fascinating conversations with people who are even 17, 16, 15, but at a certain point, it opens up some really weird questions as to how you're talking to people on the internet, and basically we want to make sure we're having conversations with people that are at least legally speaking adults. Now, I do understand, having been someone who was under 18 at one point myself, that may feel a little dismissive, and I don't mean it to be. I think if I was in the right environment with someone in person, where I knew that we could each trust each other, and that I wasn't trampling on anyone's parents or anything like that, I mean, we could have a conversation. But for the sake of the live conversations on the channel, I think it's important that we maintain a 18 and up demeanor. Okay. So sorry about that. Would have loved to talk with you. Next comment. Let's pull this up here. So, on the homophobia video again, why do religious people care so much about this? What other people do has zero interest to me. Good thing they didn't seize on left-handedness, which would make just as little sense. And I thought this was kind of funny. I've never thought about this before. But you'll see my response was that I said, well, Christianity absolutely did look down upon left-handedness at one point. Now, to be fair, there is no verse in Leviticus that says that we should take someone who's left-handed and stone them, all right? So I'm not going to claim to you that I don't think there has ever been a Christian alive who has seen left-handedness and homosexuality as being equivalent. All right. So I want to be careful how I phrase this. But left-handedness is absolutely an immutable trait that you were born with. And it also is something that at various times in the Bible itself and throughout the history of Christianity, they absolutely have looked down on left-handedness. Not in the same way that they look down on gay people, of course. But I also thought this was an interesting point, because I don't think this person, Joe Hall, meant to make this kind of analogy. But I thought it was interesting because, if you're left-handed, which you don't really know until you start doing things, with your hands and figure out whether you're ambidextrous. And a lot of people don't really realize it until they start writing, right? But if you're left-handed, you can make yourself write with the right hand. There's no reason why a left-handed person has to use their left hand. You could shame them into using their right hand. You could tell them it's a sin to use their right hand. You could show them, verses from the Bible that we're going to sit at the right hand of God, and Jesus is at the right hand of God, and we want to be at the right hand of Jesus, and right. Right is good, left is bad. We could go into that in detail. And you could argue, well, just like when you're born left-handed, you could do things right-handed if you want to. The same way, whereas if you're born gay, you could go off and have sex with a woman if you want to. Like, you could most people can make themselves have sex with someone of the opposite gender even if they're not particularly interested in it. But I just thought that this was, I know this is taking the analogy far more than this commenter probably wanted to take it, but I thought it was still very interesting because like your sexual orientation, you're born with how which hand is dominant, okay? Handedness. And you can deny it if you want. You can pretend it doesn't exist. You can pretend we're all right-handed. But at the end of the day, it doesn't change the fact that you're either right or left-handed. So anyway, I thought that was fun. Next comment. So this person says, my Mormon family ostracized me and stayed with their church, and they can't seem to understand why I don't just get over it. I wish they would watch this video. And like some of the other comments that we brought up, first of all, I'm really sorry that anyone goes through that. Also, I mentioned this in the video, but I'm going to say this again. I think I might do a whole standalone video on this at some point, because it occurred to me writ large as I was doing this video how religion is one of the few areas of our life where it's not just that there are excuses given to us to foster bigoted viewpoints, but it's one of the few areas of our life where we will actually not just hold bigoted views, but we will shun people we love in favor of those bigoted views, and we will hold it up as a virtue. And it's hard to find other places in life where we do this. I brought this up in the video, but I'll say it here again, that if I have season tickets with my friend, he and I both have a season ticket to go see the games, let's say it's the Saints, right? And we've been going for a couple of years. We sit next to each other at the games. And then one day we're going to go into a game and they say, well, your friend can't come in because he's black. Aside from the fact that would be incredibly shocking, but on top of that, I would not look at my friend and say, well, that sucks for you, man. I guess I'll catch up with you after the game and let you know how it went. I'm not going to wave at him like, hey, sucks for you. Like, I'll see you later, and text him from the game, tell him how the game's going. No, if a team were actually to pull that shit, I would leave with him. I would expect a refund, and I would cancel my season tickets. I would never go to a game from that team again. Anyone who had the nerve to tell my black friend that they couldn't come into the game is never going to get another penny of my business. And yet in religion, we do this shit all the time. I mean, and gay is not the only thing that we do this around, but homosexuality is a big example of this. That you can sit there in your religion and you can say, okay, we're all part of, Catholics, for example. We're all Catholic in the family. And then one day, your best friend or your son or your father or your uncle or someone comes out as being gay. And the church shuns them. And instead of us saying, oh, that sucks, like we can't be part of this organization anymore. No, we do so most of us do the exact opposite. We'll tell our loved one, well, that sucks that the church did that to you. And then we'll turn around and go right back to that church. We will keep worshiping in the same building. We will keep tithing, giving donations to the same denomination. We'll keep being an active part of that church even after they have openly shunned someone that we love for something that literally hurts no one at all. And yet we think it's okay with religion to tell even our closest loved ones, well, that sucks, man. I guess you're gone. And yeah, I'm going to keep going to this church. I'm going to keep, doing the same things I've always done with this church. And I guess, we can talk later and I'll tell you how things went. I'll tell you how the service was, and I'll tell you how the songs were. But like, so many people never stop to think that, oh, if this organization is horribly shunning someone that I love, maybe I don't want to be part of that organization. But when it comes to church, we do it all the time. Not every family does it, but many families do this all the time. And it's so crazy. I don't know why we just accept that with church when we don't accept it in virtually any other area of our life. Another analogy I gave in the video was, if my wife and I both worked at the same company and they started doing something that was dehumanizing to my wife, I'm not going to tell my wife, well, it sucks. I guess you're going to have to find another job, but I'm going to keep working here. Like, no, we're both going to leave the company. We might not leave that day because we have, bills to pay and everything. We might do it strategically, but I'm not going to, if my wife has truly been dehumanized by this company that I work at, I'm not going to tell her, well, that sucks for you, but I'm going to keep working here. Like that's gross. Church is the only area of our life where we, generally speaking, consider it to be acceptable that we will shun the people around us based upon the edicts of this larger organization. It's really gross. All right. Other comments? So this is a short comment, but I thought it was funny. Mezzoforte says, that face when people say objective, but it just means arbitrary. In this particular video, and I have heard Christians do this over and over again on numerous different subjects, they try to throw around this idea of objective all the time, as though they can slap the label objective on it, and therefore that means it magically becomes objective. So they'll tell you that there's objective beauty. And how do we know it's objective beauty? Because they told you it's objective beauty. They'll talk about objective truth. And again, how do we know it's the objective truth? Like, and when I say truth, I don't mean 1 + 1 = 2. I mean, like the objective truth that Jesus was resurrected. Okay. How do we know it's objective truth? Because they tell you that it's objective truth. So many times they pull up this objective label, like they can just plaster it on anything that they want without any worry about the actual meaning of the word objective. And they think that just by writing objective on it, it suddenly becomes objective. But as Mezzoforte points out, the way you're using it, it just means arbitrary. It means the exact opposite of objective. It means according to whatever is going through your mind at the time, or what you think is going through the mind of your God man. It's just completely ridiculous. Hey, Michael. Thank you, brother. I appreciate the $2 tip. You're awesome as always. Even though I joked around about trying to hide the stream from you, which we weren't actually trying to hide the stream from you. So thank you very much, friend. I appreciate that very much. Michael is always an awesome contributor, and I appreciate him so much. All right, so looking at more comments. So this one here is kind of interesting because it's a legitimate kind of question to get into. So Lisa Van Houten, who's a regular contributor to the channel, she watches most or all of my videos and comments frequently, says, in the Bible, are the anti-gay passages directed just at male-on-male sex? So does that make lesbianism technically okay because the Bible does not directly condemn it? So a couple things to note here. In the Hebrew Bible, there is absolutely no mention whatsoever of lesbianism at all in the Hebrew Bible. And in the Hebrew Bible, they specifically, of course, they didn't have a word for homosexuality back then. So the way that they refer to it is, in more specific male-on-male terms, like lying with a male as with a woman. That's what it says in Leviticus, right? So according to the letter of the law, and by the law, I mean the law, the Torah, the actual Hebrew law, there is no specific guidance whatsoever that says anything good or bad about lesbianism. Now, Christians will often point to the New Testament, like from Romans, where they talk about sexual immorality, and there's a passage there in Romans. Just let me look it up here. So this is the only one that they can even pull up that sort of kind of maybe refers to. And it's from Romans 1, 26 and 27. It says, for this reason, God gave them over to dishonorable passions. Their females exchanged natural intercourse for unnatural. And in the same way also, the males, giving up natural intercourse with females, were consumed with their passionate desires for one another. Males committed shameless acts with males and received in their own persons the due penalty for their error. Now, generally speaking, I feel I can speak pretty confidently on behalf of the general Christian view on this, which is that they would tell you that this passage, more than any other, condemns lesbian activity. Now, if we wanted to be really lawyerly, we could say this still, we don't technically know what this says if we wanted to say by the letter of the book, because all it says about women is their females exchanged natural intercourse for unnatural. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean that they were having sex with other women? Does that mean that they were just having sex with themselves? Does that mean that they were having bestiality? I mean, technically speaking, this still does not explicitly call out lesbianism. But if I'm being fair here, you can see that the rest of the passage talks about, and of course, with here, it says giving up natural intercourse with females. So it talks about the men consumed with their passion for one another. So in the context, even though it doesn't technically talk about women having sex with other women, I think it is fair to draw the not too crazy conclusion that this passage is referring to men getting it on with men and women getting it on with women. And also, even in the Old Testament, where the passages only speak about men having sexual relationships with men in a very specific way, do I really think that these old-ass Hebrew men from ancient times were cool with the idea that women might be getting down with other women? No, I don't think that. I don't think that they were in any way liberal about such things. I don't think that they even thought such things were possible most of the time. I think that usually they didn't even consider these things very much in the realm of potential activities. And when they talk about men sleeping with a male as with a woman, they're talking about a male taking an aggressive, penetrative role with another man. And I don't want to get all into that rabbit hole because people like Dan McClellan do a better job of this. But it talks about, how should I say this? There are a lot of politics involved in the reading of these because there were times when men would humiliate other men by forcing them into a submissive role. So in other words, sometimes these acts had nothing to do with homosexual proclivities, but instead had everything to do with domination. But all that being said, I'm not trying to say that these ancient Hebrew people were cool with regular male-on-male consenting homosexual relationships. I'm sure that they were not. I'm not saying that these ancient Hebrew people were cool with consenting lesbian relationships. They probably were not. But if you wanted to get very lawyerly about it, if you wanted to say, show me in the text where it explicitly says that a woman cannot do anything sexual with another woman, it does not exist in the Old Testament or the New. You'll find no reference to it at all in the Old Testament. The Old Testament is completely silent on it. And the New Testament, as I just pulled up, explicitly goes into it in one place, which is in Romans. And even there, if you wanted to be a rules lawyer about it, you could say that verse does not ban me, a woman, from having sex with another woman. But if I'm being fair, I think that it does. I mean, and I bring this up because you guys know I'm a huge advocate for LGBT, and I've been bringing it up a lot in this month because why not? It's Pride Month. And I think it's fair sometimes to look at the literal words of what's in the Bible. But I also think that sometimes you can undermine your own case by trying to pull apart these verses word by word and saying, aha, see, it doesn't specifically say this. When in fact, we pretty much know what these old conservative ancient people would have thought. These people were not going to be liberally open-minded to any sort of same-sex relationships. I mean, I don't think that they would have been. And I think that if you dive too deeply into that what's the word I'm looking for? Internal critique, into that textual analysis. If you try to break apart every word and you try to say, see, it doesn't technically ban this, I think that you risk undermining your own point, because you're basically broadcasting to everyone that you're just trying to break apart the words, one literal word by one literal word, so distinctly that you start to lose what the whole spirit is of the verse, the chapter, the book. So this is why I have said, I did a whole video on this like 6 months ago or whatever, where I said, when it comes to issues of sexuality, so many of the times in my channel, I like to do internal critique. I think it is fun at times and entertaining to show all of the internal inconsistencies in the Bible, to show the contradictions, to show the immoral iniquities that are brought down from God. I think it's fun to just lay these things out. But when it comes to issues of sexuality, I personally don't like to do a whole lot of internal critique. Here's why. Because when you do internal critique, by definition, you almost always end up at least ceding some of the moral ground to the other side. In other words, if I am looking in your Bible to try to tell you all the things that your Bible says about whether gay is good or bad or neutral, then it's implied that I am at least allowing that we should look in your Bible to figure out whether gay is good or bad or neutral. And I think that that's a dangerous perspective to take, because ultimately, I don't care. Let's say that we find a new copy of the Bible tomorrow. It's the oldest copy we've ever gotten. It's before the Dead Sea Scrolls. And by the way, it's not just older, but it's also complete. It's the entire book. There's not a single word missing. And in this new, oldest version of the Bible that we found, let's say that in that book, every single page has somewhere in it that gay is bad in all forms, whether it's male on male, female on female, or anything else. Let's just say that it's embedded into every page of the entire damn Bible. I would still say, who cares? Who fucking cares? I don't care if your Bible is absolutely crystal clear that every gay act is entirely anathema to God and is making baby Jesus cry. I don't care, because I don't care what your old fucking book says about what consenting adults do in the privacy of their own fucking bedrooms. So you can tell me all day that the words actually condemn it, that the Bible verses, really do say that all gay is bad. And even if I conceded that to you, who fucking cares? I don't care what your stupid, ancient, made-up storm god has to say about what me and anyone else wants to do in a bedroom, assuming that it's between consenting adults. I don't care if it's between me and another man. I don't care if it's between me and 5 other hot women. I don't care if it's between me and 12 senior citizens. Just whatever grown-ass adults choose to do in the privacy of their own home is their own fucking business. And I don't care what your Bible says. So, getting back to Lisa's question, it is a fair question. And as I've said, the literal answer is that the Hebrew Bible is silent on women relationships. And the, in the New Testament only addresses it once in Romans. And I don't care. Now, Christians will also try to bring up broader passages about sexual immorality, right? Fornication, sexual immorality, etc. But of course, the problem with that approach is once you start broadening it to this umbrella of sexual immorality or just overall fornication, now the question of what falls under that umbrella is entirely subjective. It's all up to personal feels. It's all up to one person's interpretation of the Bible versus another's. There is no objective way to say what is or is not fornication. There's no objective way to say what is or is not, sexual immorality. It's all a judgment call. All right. But I appreciate her comments very much. And it is very, I think it's, the last thing I'll say on this before we go on is that it is very eye-opening to me, because when I was growing up, I definitely thought that the Bible just said that all same-sex relationships were bad, period. And then when you look at the way it's worded in the Bible, that it's so specific about the way that male-on-male relationships are not allowed, and that it's so silent on female-on-female relationships, it then feels much more arbitrary. It feels much more like people just picking off the top of their head, this one or that one, and it doesn't feel like any sort of real law. It doesn't feel like it's based in any sort of logic. It feels like old men who want to control the personal viewpoint or the personal habits of people in the congregation. And that's it. All right, so next keyword, next comment. So we kind of hit this before, but this is on the homophobia one. He says, whether one agrees with this guy's take or not, his music examples were terrible. I don't even know where to begin. But also, just a small thing of many issues. At 42:25, that's not a minor fourth. It's called a minor sixth. You might have been thinking of a minor add 11, but you played a minor sixth. Tip of the iceberg. Once again, another viewer who knows music, and I am not a musician, but I love how people point out how, to me, the bigger lessons on these are this. We all use analogies, especially when you're creating content. And a well-placed analogy can do great work for making your point, right? But analogies, if you want to be intellectually honest and valid, are dangerous territories. Because if you want to use these analogies, then you really need to pick a good analogy. Because if your analogy is barely applicable and just falls down on so many levels, then I think it does more harm to your argument than it does good. Just like this asshole trying to tell us why you shouldn't be gay because some notes that he plays on a piano sound good to him and some notes don't sound good to him. And he thinks somehow that this makes a great point about whether you should do gay stuff or not. And it doesn't. It doesn't do anything of the sort. That one must have been under, so I'll have to find a different one in just a second. Grumpy, who's commonly on our live streams a lot, says, how is it possible that this musician has never heard of jazz? I had a couple comments like this too, because if you play jazz, or even if you enjoy jazz, there is no such thing as a bad note or a wrong note. There may not be the note you chose to play, and if you're not a very good musician, maybe you're playing a lot of notes that people wish you hadn't played. But in the hands of a master, there is no such thing as a bad note or a wrong note. They're just notes. You figure out how to put them together. So, like I said, I'm getting more and more comments about the AI. And I don't even know what to do about it sometimes because, as I pointed out, people are bringing up AI stuff now, even when there's not AI, or even when I've had no control over it. So Sheldon, who has been a regular contributor here, and I appreciate them being a part of the channel, but they says, "Goodbye, Adam of Nola. The AI slideshows continue. I am now unsubscribing." Which, you know, okay. I mean, I don't want anyone to unsubscribe, but this to me is no different than someone getting on Facebook and putting up a big post explaining that they're going to get off Facebook. You don't have to put up a post explaining that you're getting off Facebook. Just get off Facebook if that's what you want to do. You know what I mean? But that being said, you know, like I was curious because I did not edit this video. The God-Free Bible Study videos now are edited by my wife. My wife hates AI. She will not use AI to generate images, but she still wants to put images up behind the text while I'm reading it, so it's not just me against a black screen. So I pulled up the video, and sure enough, one of the images that she got from some other site was an AI generated image. Now, you know, if I were to take Sheldon here to heart, I guess I could call my wife in and yell at her and say, "Hey, don't use that image." But no, I'm not going to sit here and get all up in my feels because my wife went and grabbed an image off of some other site. And then after that, you know, after she grabs that image, I'm not going to sit here and try to audit her editing to make sure that some image that she grabbed was not an AI image. At the end of the day, if it bothers you that much, then don't be here, you know. That's all I can say. So I'm going to jump to something here. Well, actually, this was the next one in the list. So this is good to bring up because I see I'm not sitting here watching all of the comments, but I am watching some of the comments coming back here. And of course, we're getting a lot of input here from Matthew. So first of all, this was the comment that Matthew put on the live stream after last Tuesday. If you guys were on the Tuesday live stream, you know this was a very interesting time. So you see that Matthew's thing says, "Yeah, I apologize. You didn't even misspeak. You said it right. That was from our first video, and I thought you said that to me originally. I've held that in. I was even thinking twice, like, didn't even say it, but I remembered it wrong. Sorry. I actually feel a lot better now that I know you didn't say it. And whether you did say it or not, I thought we could easily pass it, but I guess it was your pet peeve, or you know you were passionate about it for sure. LOL. But that's on me, and I owe you $100 if you want it. I'm a poor boy that pays his debts. How can I talk to you on Discord or the phone so we can have our own conversation, and I can tell you the subjects and what I'm really about? So let me know if you have time and we can do that, because you're in a different mode when you're online, LOL. Well, at least I hope. But one more thing, I just want to know, did you see that picture I posted of me with the big head and you with the little head from Beetlejuice, a little tiny Beetlejuice head? It was funny. We'll have a nice day. So no, I didn't see the picture, although I'm sure I probably would have had a laugh at it. For what it's worth, in case it's not clear, that Matthew did come on here and put a post apologizing. So I appreciate his apology. I accept his apology. I do see a lot of people saying, then call in, telling him to call in because he likes to put a lot of comments. So I'm going to say this publicly. I'm assuming that Matthew is probably listening right now. I don't want Matthew to call in. I'm not saying that he could never call in again, but I'll tell you right now, I don't feel like talking to Matthew, and I appreciate his apology. I don't want his money. I don't want his $100, but it's nice of him to offer when we never even agreed on any amount of money, because I was not going to agree on any amount of money, because to me, it's not about money. I appreciate him apologizing. I accept his apology. Just because I accept his apology doesn't mean that I actually still want him on the call. And I'll tell you why. Well, there are certain entertaining aspects about having Matthew on the line. The bigger problem to me is that Matthew and I'm sorry if this does not sound very charitable, but to me, Matthew, on numerous occasions, has not been an honest interlocutor. And it's not just this issue that we're talking about where he accused me of slinging a slur at him, although this is a perfect example of it. Even though he's apologizing now, he said in the last call that I had slurred him in this way, and I told him immediately, no, I didn't. I would not say that to people. Although I tried to also have humility, because although I did not think that I had said that at all, I thought, I don't want to be the guy who forgets that I said this horrible thing to someone online. So while I was on the call with him, I looked up the transcripts from both calls that we had had, and I said, no, it's not there. I didn't say this to you. Of course, the transcripts are not perfect. You can still say something that doesn't get caught in the transcript. So I hung up with him, and he came back in the chat, and he came back in the chat like a lion, basically telling everyone that I had slurred him and that he had the timestamp to prove it. And he was, quite frankly, obstinate about it. And it was only after I then pulled up the video and showed the transcript and everyone could hear what I had said, and I made fun of it for 10 minutes, that finally, I guess, he realized after the fact that, oh, I didn't actually say it. And he's not going to be able to claim that I said it. And, anyone could mishear a word. I understand that. And the word that was actually said was retort. So I do understand that you could mishear retort. So I'm not mad necessarily that you misheard retort and took it a different way. But it is not an honest interaction at all to then come back after you've had your own chance off the call to pull up the video and listen to the video and look at the transcript on the video and see definitively that the video has me saying retort. And yet, I don't know what you thought you were doing. I don't know if you thought that just by plastering these ideas in the comments that nobody would check. I mean, you gave the timestamp. So you had to know at a minimum that someone else would pull it up. But I think you had to know that I would pull it up on the live stream. And I even said on the live stream before I pulled it up, I said, guys, if I had said this to him, I will apologize to him publicly on this live stream. But of course, that isn't what happened, was it? So he had every chance to actually verify what I had said. And I don't know how he couldn't have verified it, since he was the one who came back and gave us the timestamp. And then even after I pulled it up online and showed everyone what was said, for a while he kept going on in the comments. He just kept going. He was doubling down and tripling down and quadrupling down. And quite frankly, it was embarrassing. It was really embarrassing. And there have been other moments, even in our, that was the third time I've talked to Matthew. I don't think that Matthew is a bad person, but I think that Matthew is not an honest interlocutor, because on other areas, he has not been honest in what he has said to me while we have been live. What's up, Anka?
Yeah, hi.
Good to see you tonight.
Why he didn't? Yeah, it's really nice to see you as well, cooking. You know why he didn't thought that anyone gonna check?
Why?
Because believers never check sources. They just believe,
Ooh.
They don't really care.
So I don't disagree with you, but then he had to actually check the video in order to get the timestamp.
Yeah, but it's because you kind of put him in a corner.
Right. Right.
And he didn't really check the source, because if he really checked it, he would have see that it's not the right word.
Yeah, it seems like he found the timestamp that he remembered we had the conversation, but it sounds like he didn't actually listen to the conversation or look at the transcript at all.
It's literally just like when you're showing believer a scripture and they don't check it and they accuse you of lying, and then you go check it with them live, like on the record or on a stream, and the book says what you said it's gonna say,
Yeah.
and they have no idea what's in the book.
Yeah. And like, and I don't want to just make it about that one instance, although that one instance is very big to me. But I will also point out that that same night again we had talked again about the shape of the earth, and he said it's spherical. He said it's a sphere. And yet, not only were some of his verbiage a little weird, because if it's a sphere, where are these pillars that the earth is on? But he didn't want to answer that. But then, remember afterwards, someone else in the chat pulls up, they pulled up the link to his video where it's this whole video. It's like an 8-minute video of nothing but this long diatribe of really weak flat earther talking points. I mean, they're not that there's a bunch of great flat earther talking points, but a lot of them were like the worst, easiest debunked flat earth talking points. And it's just like this long 8-minute diatribe of these flat earth talking points. And yet he said that he thinks that the earth is a sphere. Like, you can't tell me that you think the earth is a sphere and then say, oh, but look at this video I put up of 8 minutes of flat earth talking points. I mean, those two things are logically incompatible.
Yeah, it is, but like, you're searching logic here? Like,
I know.
who are we talking about?
Yeah.
It's really funny because I recently, like 2 days ago, I had a conversation with a Russian dude. I think he's not Russian. I think he's Ukrainian, but it doesn't matter. A Russian-speaking dude who was talking to me about like Bible and laws of God. He didn't know that there's like more than 10 laws that God gave, and he called himself like pastor and preacher. So it's kind of funny. But when I showed him the book that in English it's called Deuteronomy, and it's basically like the book of laws that God gives Moses, and Moses just tells the people like, this is the laws, like follow them forever, blah blah blah, like all this stuff.
Right.
It's even funnier in Russian, because in Russian this book basically called like second laws. Like literally, it's not some complicated name like in English, like Deuteronomy. Like what even is this? Like,
Right.
Who knows? It's some mythical creature probably. And the dude didn't know that the book that basically called Second Laws is about laws.
Well, you know what Deuteronomy translates to, right?
No, I don't. I never actually went into
let me
it
pull it up
because
here
the name is
so
just
you can
funny.
see. The word Deuteronomy comes from the Greek word Deuteronomion, which translates to second law or repetition of the law.
Oh, that's nice. Nice to know.
Yep.
I never went into it because it's just such a funny name. I don't really care like if it translates into anything. But
I
good
didn't
to
know it until recently. It's a weird name.
Yeah, it is. And in Russian, it's like literally like second law. So you know what it is. You can, like, even if you don't know Bible at all, you're not like, if you never heard about Christianity, you still can kind of, from the name of the book, kind of guess what it's about.
Right. Like the Book of Numbers has all of the census of all the tribes, because it's numbers, right?
Yeah.
In the Book of Exodus,
Yeah,
it's
kind of.
them leaving Egypt, because it's an exodus from Egypt. So yeah.
Yeah,
Although
it is.
Leviticus is one that throws people off too. But the reason it's called Leviticus is because there's a lot of the laws given there about the Levites and the Levitical priest and everything.
Yeah. In Russian, it's just Book of Levit, so it's a little bit easier to understand. But yeah, it's basically the same. Oh, and he didn't know like a lot of really basic stuff. How, for example, we have like, you know how in America the most popular version is KJV? and it's like really, really bad.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, even new KJV is better. But like in Russian, the most popular version is synodal version. It's a bit newer than KJV. It's a little bit better, but it's still like really, really bad. But he didn't know that there's like other translations that are better, even from kind of the same time. So we have like Eastern translation, and he thought it's a Eastern translation because it's like to Arabic, but it's Russian. It's just like, Eastern Orthodoxy.
Right.
So it's like Eastern translation.
I know we brought this up before, but I love this. You can look this up at a couple different sites, but the 613 mitzvot, or commandments, and these are all from the Hebrew Bible. And like we talked about last time, some of these are duplicative, right? Because some of these are basically the same law given to you, 2 or 3 times. So there's not really I don't know what the real number is. 613 functional commands is not the real number, because if we took out all the ones that are duplicates, we'd probably be down to like 450 or something. And then if we took out all the ones that are like very specific things about like how you are to build the tabernacle or something like that, that doesn't apply to anyone today, right? Unless you're building a tabernacle. So, but if we just tried to break it down to the general rules that are given to us by Yahweh to live, that we're supposed to use to live our life, it would be so many more than 10. It's not even funny. There's just dozens and dozens of these laws, and they're just clear as day. Most of them are in the Pentateuch. Almost all of them are in the Pentateuch. And there are whole long chapters in the Pentateuch that's just like, here are the laws for this, here are the laws for that. Now, of course, I understand that modern Christians will tell you that they've like stricken out all the dietary laws, right? But just because they've stricken them out doesn't mean that the laws aren't still there. So you have like all these,
and they're basing this stricken down based on like one story that was added later that was not in a previous papyruses that we have. Like we have a papyruses. I don't remember what they are, but they're like papyrus B68 and 72 or something like this, and they don't contain this story about washing hands or something.
Well, like in Acts,
they don't contain an addition from the author that it's about food, not just about washing hands before eating.
Right. And I do understand. There's actually a number of verses in the New Testament. I need to make a document that shows where all those verses are, like, so I can reference them quickly, because there are a bunch of verses in the New Testament that are interpreted as saying, hey, you don't have to follow the dietary laws anymore. The clearest one is the dream that he has where, he's, I think it's from the book of Acts, where he has the dream and, he's shown all this food and he's told in the dream to eat everything. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, cool story, bro. Like, I also had a dream that, like, I can fly and I can just go in a bank and withdraw whatever money I want,
Well, here's the thing, and I know some of my, regular viewers probably get tired of me harping on this, but I don't get tired of pulling this up. Even for all the verses that they pull up from the New Testament that they use to try to justify not having to follow this set of laws or that set of laws. This right here, I don't know how you can make it any clearer that this means you have to follow all of the Old Testament laws. And this is, if we're to believe the New Testament, if we're actually to believe the Gospels, this is supposed to be the words of your God-man himself telling you explicitly to follow all the Old Testament laws. But still, like, Christians will read this exact passage right here, and they'll say, oh, I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill. And they'll say, see, Jesus fulfilled all the laws. And like, Who cares? So he
And
fulfilled
then
the
they go
laws.
straight to Paul.
Right, exactly. But like this is a classic example to me because Christians will look at this and they'll say, see, Jesus fulfilled all the laws. Who cares? Fulfilling a law has never made a law go away. I have never heard someone say, because I've fulfilled the law, now
And-
the law goes away. The analogy I always
and-
give is this. I paid my taxes last year. I fulfilled the law. That doesn't mean that this year I can stop paying my taxes because, hey, judge, I fulfilled the law
wish.
last year, so it goes away now. No, the law is still there. It's still in effect. Fulfilling a law doesn't make it go away.
Yeah, but also like you can just like, okay, you misunderstood like this specific sentence. Just read like a little bit more.
Right.
There is like you like the next sentence, you know?
Yeah, and then like there, and it says, until heaven and earth pass away. Now, I don't know. I know you claim to be calling in from Moscow, but but I don't know exactly where you're at. I can't prove where you're at, but I'm going to guess that even if you're lying about being in Moscow, I'm going to guess that you're probably consuming this live stream from somewhere on Earth, and
Yeah, probably.
I am absolutely
like
sending this
based on
live
the
stream.
delay that we have in the conversation, I'm probably on Earth.
Yes, exactly. And I can guarantee you that I am generating this live stream from Earth. So I think we can all agree that Earth has not passed away. So
Heaven and Earth didn't pass away because like in different translations it literally refers to like sky and like plane. So
right. And
Because
also,
heaven in-
that's a good point
in-
because it depends on how you want to take heaven here too. Because if you assume heaven here just means sky, well then this would be until the sky
yeah,
and the earth
that's
pass
what
away.
that's what Israelites back in the day thought that like sky is. They thought it's heaven.
Right. Exactly. But if you assume that here heaven means like the heaven that you go to when you die if you're good and all that shit, well, that heaven we're supposed to believe is
It's
never
never
going
gonna
away.
pass away.
Yeah,
You know.
for eternity. So
And if we believe Jehovah's Witnesses, Earth never gonna pass away. It's just gonna be transformed into the basically heaven as well.
well, to be fair, there are other Christian denominations that believe that as well.
I just like using them as an example because Christians don't like them.
That's fair. That's very fair. But like with Matthew, now he apologized for lying about me, saying that I had slurred him, which is great. He had previously admitted that he was wrong about the book of Enoch being in the King James Version of the Bible. And according to him, because he's said this multiple times on my live stream and in my comments, according to him, he's not been wrong about a single other thing that we ever talked about other than those 2 points. And then he has repeatedly put in the comments about how he cooked, about how he totally destroyed me. And I mean, some of it is just funny, like braggadocio, but also at a certain point, you know what it feels like? It feels like playing chess with a pigeon. Have you heard that before?
Yeah, I heard this analogy.
Yeah, I bring this up all the time, and I enjoy this because, if you play chess with a pigeon, you can checkmate them, 10 different times. You can destroy them, and they're still going to knock over the pieces. They're going to shit on the board, and they're going to tell everyone that they won. So at a certain point, it becomes meaningless to even have a conversation because I don't expect that most people who call in here are ever going to say, wow, Adam changed my mind on something, because that's really, really, really rare that any two people ever change each other's mind, right? But what I don't
We can
expect,
hope that he like slowly changes his mind, like understanding how he is wrong about like a lot of the things slowly, and then understanding how like a lot of the points you're making are actually right. So like he might slowly change his mind. He's gonna deny it for sure, but
I mean, never say never. I just know that, I've had other conversations. Hell, even on Tuesday, I had other conversations with people who were what I would call honest interlocutors. You know, an honest interlocutor to me is not someone who tells me that I'm right, because that's not what makes you honest, right? But an honest interlocutor can at least have a reasonable discussion with you, even about things that you disagree with. And we can even admit that, okay, we're not going to agree on that, or, you know, this is an article of faith, or I would have to go look that up to understand that more. You know, like those are things that are fine. But when you get done with the call and then you want to tell everyone how you just completely destroyed me, when the plain evidence of the live streams, which is available for anyone to watch, says exactly the opposite, then it's like, then why are we even talking at this point? This becomes completely fruitless. You know, I don't know what we're even accomplishing.
Yeah, it is what it is, you know. That's how it works.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, there is entertainment value in talking with people that just are going to obstinately tell you that you're wrong every single thing that you say. I mean, sometimes that can be entertaining to a point, you know. But also,
they also sometimes can be right.
Oh, sure.
Because probably if you're gonna talk with like a biologist about some like really specific and hard topic, you're gonna be wrong probably about like 90% of the times, and they're gonna tell you that you're wrong about it, but they at least gonna show you like where you're wrong and how you can learn about it.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're just gonna say like, forget about it. You're never gonna learn. It's too complex. I spent like 15 years learning this.
Yeah. Well, there's also a point, though, in conversation with anyone who's called in where if you can't even acknowledge a basic definitional fact of something, then it becomes, I feel like it becomes pointless to move forward. And, you know, like the example I'll bring up, because we talked about it twice with him online, was, you know, he wanted to posit the idea that the virgin birth came from parthenogenesis, which on its surface is like, okay, if you're trying to explain a virgin birth, parthenogenesis is a reasonable thing that you could reach for, right? But then we were talking about it. I'm like, okay, so what percentage of the genes come from the mother? And he kept wanting to say that 50% of the genes come from the mother. 100% of the genes come from the mother. That's not even up for debate. That is the definition of what parthenogenesis is, because there is no father in parthenogenesis. And then, like this last time he called, before he accused me of throwing a slur at him, he just said, well, you know, we can just agree to disagree. And on a point like that with parthenogenesis,
you can't.
We're not going to agree to disagree, because you are literally defying what is the basic definition of what parthenogenesis is. Parthenogenesis means that 100% of your genes come from your mother every single time, because there is no father in parthenogenesis. If there is a father...
Yeah, but that's because he wants to like have his cake and eat it too, because he wants to say that like God actually did it, so it's not actually parthenogenesis. Because if he admits that it was parthenogenesis, then it means that like God had nothing to do with it at all. Like, okay.
Right. And the funny thing is, we end up going down that path 2 live streams ago, because I love talking to Christians about this. Because when they made these stories in the first place, of course, people didn't know exactly how new babies came into the earth. I mean, they knew that sex was a thing. They knew that when a man had sex with a woman, and ended up getting her pregnant, they knew that much, right? But they didn't know about chromosomes. They didn't know about 43, or 23 coming from each of the parents, etc. They didn't know how that worked. So when you talk about God putting a seed or whatever in Mary, right? Then that leads to some very problematic and uncomfortable questions for Christians who want to believe that Jesus was the Messiah. Because Jesus, the Messiah, according to all of the prophecies, is supposed to be from the line of David, right? So if God put half of his chromosomes in Mary, and Jesus had half of his chromosomes from Mary and half from God, then you could argue that he came from the line of David because Mary might have been in the line of David. Although old Hebrews never would have accepted that you follow the lineage through the line of the woman, right? But let's put that aside for a second. Let's just assume that, well, Mary was descended from David. So if Mary was descended from David and God got her pregnant, I'm not implying that he screwed her physically, but if he put his seed in her, whatever, then that means that, okay, so Jesus could come from the line of David. The problem there is that if he got half of his chromosomes from Mary, then he's not a God. That means he has half of his genetic material from God and half of it from a human. We have a word for that. It's called a demigod. But of course, no Christian actually wants to tell you that Jesus is a demigod. A demigod like Hercules, right? They don't want to tell you that he's a demigod. They want to tell you, no, he's fully God. Well, okay, if he's fully God, then that would mean that God put 46 chromosomes in Mary's womb, which is fine if you want to accept that miracle. But now that means that Jesus is not from the line of David, because it means that Mary is nothing more than a surrogate mother.
Yeah. Have you also heard this? I think it was like a long time ago, but there were some posts from probably Christian like moms or something that were saying that Jesus has 47 chromosomes, and 47th chromosome is a chromosome of God.
I have not ever seen those, although that would lead to some really big problems, because while you can be a human with 47 chromosomes, those humans have genetic disorders with traits that we can trace. Like there's names for these disorders where you have extra chromosomes.
Yeah. But it's just I've seen a couple of them, like screenshots from Facebook groups and stuff where moms were discussing this thing, and like they just probably don't know what they're talking about. That's why they're so confident saying this, because suggest that like Jesus has 47 chromosomes. It's kind of interesting.
Well, but even then, even if you want to assume that Jesus got 46 of his chromosomes from Mary, and that, let's say he got a 47th chromosome from Yahweh, right? And let's assume that somehow he was born without any genetic disorder, even though he had 47 chromosomes. That would still mean that he can't, by definition, be fully a God, because fully a God would have all God chromosomes. You can't have...
That's why they usually don't go into biology, because biology just kind of destroys them.
It destroys the whole thing. Yeah. And I just think that's funny, because I know they don't want to talk about biology, but if you want to tell me this shit about, well, first of all, the hypostatic union is literally violates logic. It is logically incoherent. You can't be fully God and fully man at the same time. It makes no sense.
It only makes sense if all men are God.
True.
Then God just doesn't really mean anything anymore, because if everyone God, then no one is God.
That's a really good point. So if you want to assume that any of us with our human chromosomes could, according to some, special definition, be God, then I guess you could say that Jesus was fully man and fully God. But that breaks
and
almost
technically
every...
Jesus teach this. He technically teach I am the Father are one, and you through me are going to be the same, or something like this.
Well, he said that if you've seen the Father, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father.
No, there were also a quote from him that was I and the Father are one. That's one that Christians are always using. But then in the literally next sentences, it says something like, "But through me you are the same as me." Like so, if he is fully God, then everyone who follows him are fully God as well. So like
Yeah. Let me pull that up. It's John 10:30. Let me see here.
I hope I don't misremember it.
No, you got it. I mean, I had to look up what the actual verse was, but I'll read the whole thing, because if we just read 10:30, the entire 10:30 is the Father and I are one.
Yeah.
So let's read it in a little more context. At the time the festival of the dedication took place in Jerusalem, it was winter, and Jesus was walking in the temple in the portico of Solomon. So the Jews gathered around him and said to him, "How long will you keep us in suspense? If you are the Messiah, tell us plainly." Jesus answered, "I have told you, and you do not believe. The works that I do in my Father's name testify to me, but you do not believe because you do not belong to my sheep. My sheep hear my voice, I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they will never perish. No one will snatch them out of my hand. My Father, in regard to what he has given me, is greater than all, and no one can snatch them out of the Father's hand. The Father and I are one." So a couple things are interesting here. First of all, when he says, "My Father, in regard to what he has given me, is greater than all," well, Jesus is part of all. Like, he's making it sound here like the Father is greater than Jesus, but then he says the Father and I are one, which seem to be contradictory.
Yeah, logic is not the strong suit.
Yeah, exactly. Now, to be clear, I mean, I can tell you how I find this to be logical, but not in a way that Christians want to believe, right? And it's, that it's a fairly ancient idea that you could be one with God. That that's not even heretical to say that you can be one with God. So when he says that my Father, in regard to what he has given me, is greater than all, and no one can snatch them out of the Father's hand, he seems to be distinguishing that he is not the Father, right? But then when he says the Father and I are one, to me, and I'm not saying that, hardcore Christians are going to agree with me on this, but, to me, what he's saying is that, look, I am one with the Father. Like I am basically like I am completely spiritually aligned with him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The other thing to remember is that John, of course, has hands down the highest Christology of the four Gospels. It's not even close. So if you want to look at this in a historical perspective, and if you want to be realistic about the way and the order in which the Gospels were written, the simple fact is that, because the first Gospel written was Mark, even though the first one in the Bible is Matthew, but the first one written was Mark, then Matthew, then Luke, then John, and there's a clear ascension. There's a clear process that you can see the writers going through from low Christology to high Christology. And John was the latest of the four. John was written, even by the most conservative estimates, was written at least 15 or 20 years after the first three were written. And it feels like John was written in a way that where he was at that point trying to put a much stronger case in place that Jesus was God. Like, I feel like he was almost trying to correct the first three Gospels. He was also trying to write it. He also wrote it in a way that was very appealing to the Romans. You can tell that he wanted to make the Jews look as bad as possible, and he wanted to make the Romans look as good as possible. And all of this comes through in the book if you just read it without your God goggles on,
Yeah. Also, if you go a little bit lower, there's going to be one small verse that we are using for my gay Jesus argument. It's where it says, "Father is in me, and I'm in the Father."
That's fair. I remember that from last time we talked about that. That's hilarious. Now, I will say this. I do.
I found a little bit of verses that like kind of supports the argument non-directly. I can share them if you want, but we don't need to make this stream about gay Jesus again.
I mean, actually, do me a favor because I know you sent me an email last time. Could you send it to me on email? Because what I want to do is I want to like put them all together, either in a live stream or in a video, because I think it's, you know, I'm not going to sit here.
Good short.
What's that?
I think it could be like a good short, like YouTube short.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's hilarious though. Now, on a serious note, I do appreciate, like, I don't know if you follow Dan McClellan at all, but he talks about the divine name. And going back to the Hebrew Bible, there is a long established tradition that a lot of modern readers don't understand at all. And I know that sounds condescending, but I'll say it anyway, of this concept of the divine name. And the divine name is that God can put his power in people. It's like a power of attorney. So he can basically, like a king who sends someone out to do business on his behalf, right? The king can't be everywhere at once. So the king can send someone to your village, and this messenger can say, you know, I am the messenger of the king, and in the name of the king, I declare that these things will happen. Yeah. And you could get in his face and you could say, look, you're not the king, but you also risk a lot of reprisals there, because he could go back to the king and say, look, you told me that I had your authority, but these people still treating me like shit. So there are a lot of places in the Bible, going back to Genesis, where it's very clear that God is putting his power in other people or other beings. So I'm only bringing this up because I enjoy the gay Jesus thing. It's fun. It's entertaining for me to talk about. But
I also sent you the link to the website. Like it's like a blog website that my pastor has. Not my priest, ex-priest has. There is a lot of articles in English, but some of them are in what language do they use in Netherlands, and some of them are in Russian.
Oh,
so
Dutch.
Dutch, yeah. So you can use Google Translate to like read them if you want to, for some themes that you like enjoy or want to enjoy, because there is like a lot of stuff. He was doing this blog for like 6 years, so there is a lot of stuff to read.
I did get the link. I haven't had a chance to go through it yet, but I am absolutely going to go through it. So I appreciate it very much.
He pretty recently made one like really nice about slavery in the Bible, and he also has some like really funny like homosexual monks and stuff. So you will enjoy it.
I still need to set up my Christian foot washing OnlyFans channel.
Yeah, that would be nice.
I'm gonna put on my robes and talk like I'm blessing people as someone washes my feet right in front of the camera.
Yeah. And just read like the worst passages out of context, really dirty.
That would be so great. Or it doesn't even have to be out of context. I can read like Song of Solomon. You know, they got some.
No, it's just funnier if it's out of context, because then like you're making all the wrong things.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah, I agree. That would be pretty funny. Oh, okay.
What is that?
What should we do? Should we go through more comments?
Can you open, if you can, Revelations 14:4?
Sure.
Because this is just a funny one. I'm gonna send you like all of them and some commentary from my priest as well, but it's just a funny one.
It says, "It is these who have not defiled themselves with women, for they are virgins. These follow the Lamb wherever he goes. They have been redeemed from humankind as first fruits for God and the Lamb. and in their
Yeah.
mouth
So
no lie was found. They are blameless.
like it's good to not like defile yourself with woman. Like ah
But get with the lamb.
yeah.
Well, I'm sure you know this, but you know, if you really follow the New Testament, and I don't just mean the Gospels, but I mean, you know, the teachings of Paul. Paul was he was pretty much against sex in almost all forms. You know, he famously said, you know, like it's best to not defile yourself, but if you can't help yourself, then fine, you know, get married. So at least your passions will be contained within this union. But he pretty much was like, yeah, the best thing is just don't have sex, don't get married, don't have kids.
Yeah, this is the thing that we talked with my priest about, because like he described it really well, because he described it through the lens of like a quote unquote wartime. Like these people was waiting for the apocalypse to happen, so they were all thinking how, oh, you should like not sin, you'd follow like all the important laws, you should just like be careful not to sin, like because any moment the apocalypse can start and you're just gonna go to hell. Like what are you doing with your life? So that's why there's so many verses about like not getting married, not having kids, like all this stuff, because it was really important for them. It was for them like a wartime basically.
Well, this is one thing that Christians do not want to address very much. That, you know, of course, they want to have black and white. They want to be able to say, look, this is what the book says, although they don't, because when it says things that are inconvenient to them, they don't want to follow it. But that's another discussion. But I think in their perfect world, they want to have black and white. They want to say, this is what the book says. The problem with that is that if you rob the New Testament of its historical context, and from the context of what the people believed who wrote it, you get a very warped view of things, because Jesus himself, through his own words, we know, thought that the end was very near. You know, there are those among you who will not taste death, right? Until I come back. So
Yeah.
He thought this was going to happen soon. Paul also thought that the end times were almost here. And I'm not saying this to defend Paul or to defend Jesus, but I am saying that if you are reasonable about things, if you're not an ate up, hardcore Christian, but if you said, even as a Christian, you said, look, I want to read this text in a reasonable understanding from a historical perspective. Okay, these are people who thought that any day now it was all going to end. And that's important, because if you understand that perspective, what do people act like and what do people preach when they really think that shit's about to end any day now?
You can look at any apocalyptic preacher that like exists right now. Even like you can like they all preach like sell everything, like donate all your money, like go like feed homeless, go preach the gospel. Like they don't tell you like marry and have kids.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think this is funny because I give Christians shit for this, for being hypocrites, because, like Jesus told them, sell everything and follow me, right?
I love giving them this shit.
Yeah, that is crystal clear. But I will also admit to you, when I'm not just enjoying giving them shit, I will admit to you that, do I really think that Jesus would have said that if he understood that 2,000 years later, there would still be no end times and we'd still be, debating what he said or whatever? I don't think he would have said that, because I think in Jesus's mind, he was convinced that, yeah, the shit's about to go down. The end times are almost here. So when you look at it in that perspective, a lot of his more radical teachings make more sense, because if you really believe in your head that the end times are here, then it warps all of your perspective and your teachings on things.
Yeah, that's why I prefer the version of the Jesus from Matthew, because it's basically like I see him through this story as a guy who thought he's like a suffering Messiah, the first one, and when he's gonna suffer like on the cross, then the actual like Son of Man, Son of God, gonna came down and like save everyone who believed in him. So, and then when he's saying, "Father, why you forsaken me?" he basically admits that like everything was a lie.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so Christians hate when you bring up this guy's name, but Bart Ehrman does a great job
Oh,
of pointing this out because
censor the name.
yeah, exactly. But Bart Ehrman, he says it plainly, and I totally agree with him. That he says he doesn't think that Jesus ever actually thought he was going to get crucified. And I think that's absolutely correct. I mean, so many people who try to fulfill an apocalyptic role, even if they think of themselves in apocalyptic terms, they still think that things are going to work out for me or my people are going to save
Yeah.
me.
That's why at the end he says, "Father, why you forsaken me?" Because he thought that he's going to be saved, and
Yeah.
he realized he wouldn't be saved. Like that's not his actually story.
Yeah. It's like suddenly you realize, oh shit. wait a minute.
Yeah. And to be continued roles.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's funny. But when you take that, so this is something that having been a Christian for 40 years, I will tell you that I think that it robs the narrative of so much of its juice when you just try to pull it out and pull verses out and give whole sermons about something today. Like, no, let's talk about who the historical Jesus probably was. As of course that's never going to be known, but
If he ever existed.
right, and that's fair too. Like, I'm not a mythicist, but I will say, like, it
I'm
can be
leaning
fun to go down the
more
mythicist.
towards it.
Well, it can be fun to go down the mythicist rabbit hole because we don't. This is something Christians will get pissed off when you tell them. We have the number of contemporary accounts that we have of Jesus is 0. We have 0 contemporary accounts of Jesus. Now, they won't like to hear that because they'll tell you that we have all this eyewitness testimony of Jesus. We have the Gospels
We don't.
that are posthumously attributed to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And even then, they weren't all witnesses to Jesus. We have Paul, who his witness to Jesus was a vision. He had a vision of Jesus on the road to Damascus, but he never met Jesus. At least, I mean, I know we can get into arguments about, well, spiritually, did Jesus come down and talk to him? But literally speaking, he never met Jesus. He never saw Jesus. We have 0 contemporary accounts of Jesus at all. So
We don't hit like not even like accounts like in writing. Like no one drew him at all. Like people never tried to like drew him like on the walls or on a tablets or whatever. Like never made any art with him. Like they never write anything like to him. He never wrote anything. Like he never dictated to write anything. Like why?
well, to be fair, I know it's going to sound funny coming from me, but like I said, we can go down the mythicist rabbit hole, and I think it's fun and entertaining. And I'm not saying that mythicists are wrong. I'm saying that I think it's reasonable to believe that there was some person who called himself, Yeshua or Jesus or however he pronounced it, who was a was an apocalyptic itinerant preacher in Judea. Now, we could argue whether that person even existed, but we know that there were multiple people in the time who were claiming to be the Messiah. All right, because it was kind of like
There
a
are
little
still people who claim to be a Messiah.
It was kind of a cottage industry. So, but that being said, is it shocking to me that we have, like you said, no one who drew pictures of Jesus? I don't think that's actually shocking. Even if we assume that he was a real person who lived, I don't think it's shocking because he was someone leading what was at the time a small rebellious movement that gave the authorities pause. They didn't like him, but he wasn't a king. He wasn't a prince. He had no formal title. He was, like in that time, in the year 0 CE or whatever, who was getting pictures made of themselves, right? There were two people that had likenesses made of themselves.
Some random guy who believed in a man with a head of the
really,
animal.
There are only, I could be oversimplifying this, but I think there are only two groups of people that had likenesses made of themselves at the time. One were the people with political power, the kings, the governors, etc. We have paintings and, statues and such, about the kings and the emperors and shit, right? And then the second group was the rich people. The rich people paid to have portraits made of themselves or statues made of themselves. But if you weren't rich and if you weren't someone with established political power, no one made renderings of you.
But there's like that's kind of the thing. Like we have I'm gonna butcher the name, Alexamenos Graffito. Do you know this thing?
I do not.
If you Google it, it's like you can Google the earliest depiction of Jesus, like on a wall or something like this, and it's going to be a picture of a dude and like crucified guy with a like head of a donkey, with the caption saying basically like Alexamenos like praying to his god or something like this. And like some random dude has a picture of him, like where someone was mocking him, making a graffiti, but Jesus doesn't have like any of these pictures, like at all.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying you don't have a point, but I'm saying in general, in most places, how long does graffiti get preserved?
It depends, but like this graffiti specifically preserved like kind of well.
Well,
but yeah,
we have examples of graffiti coming down to us from millennia ago, but I'm saying that those examples are probably the 1%.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But like we would expect to find like at least something. That's why I'm saying like not only like pictures or graffitis or like sculptures maybe, or like some writing to Jesus, some writing from Jesus, maybe like dictated by him or dictated to him, like something. We don't have anything at all.
Well, we wouldn't have writing from Jesus because as far as we know, he was illiterate. I mean, he may have been able to read, but we don't have any reason to believe that he wrote anything ever in his life. So maybe illiterate is the wrong term, but he probably could read, although we don't know that. But we don't have any reason to believe that he ever wrote a single thing in his life.
He was a bad carpenter.
Well, also, writing at that time was expensive as fuck. Just to have writing implements was expensive. I mean, and I'm not counting graffiti, right? Because you could, put a word on the side of a building or something, but to actually write, to have a scroll or parchment, and to have ink and a pen, like that alone was expensive. It was really expensive. So
yeah, Keith Webb in a comment saying like it pretty well. If you read Christ before Jesus, being mythicist doesn't seem such a silly idea. And not even reading his book, like even if you just listen to him talking about this stuff, it's kind of already seems like not that silly of idea. But yeah, like there's just a lot of questions that we probably never gonna get answers because,
Well, and that's why I say again. I mean, I want to be careful the way I say this because I'm not snarky or dismissive about mythicists. You know what I mean? Like if someone tells me I don't think Jesus ever existed, I'll say, okay. I mean, that's a fair opinion. I also do tend to fall back on the fact that even a lot of secular / atheist scholars tend to believe that Jesus was a real person. Now, that doesn't mean that he was a real person. That doesn't mean they can't be wrong. But, you know, like again, using like Bart Ehrman, right? Bart Ehrman is an atheist. I'm not saying that I agree with everything Bart Ehrman says. I'm not saying I'm his puppet. But, you know, Bart Ehrman, I think, is representative of the view I'm talking about, which is that it's probably reasonable to believe that there was a man, you know, in the ancient Levant 2,000 years ago who went by Yeshua and, you know, was crucified by the Romans for being a rebel. But, I mean, if you told me that you don't believe it and you think Jesus never existed, I'm not going to tell you, I'm not going to talk to you like you're a flat earther. I'm not going to talk to you like you're a young earth creationist. I'm not going to talk to you like you're stupid. I'm just going to say, well, I hear what you're saying. I feel like the corpus of evidence leads me to believe that there probably was a person on whom the legends are hung. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what I thought as well for a long time. I even after like reading Bible, I kind of thought that maybe it was like multiple actually persons, because in the Bible there is some passages that suggest that like Jesus arrived in two different cities at the same time, basically. So like it can be that there were like multiple people and then they just like merged into one figure in a story. It kind of plays in a way that like Jesus from the Bible never existed, because it was like different persons and stuff. But at the same time, like, who really cares? It's just like, it's not really that bad of idea to think that he never existed, because Christians probably could never prove, at least with information we have right now, that like he actually existed, even historically.
I guess I don't disagree with you totally, but I will say, you know, when you say who really cares, I will, gosh, I'm going to sound like a fucking apologist when I say this, but I'll say it anyway.
Let's do it. You're
yeah,
playing
exactly.
devil's advocate. God's advocate.
So here's the deal. You know, like Christians will try to tell you like, well, Jesus must have been real. He must have been resurrected because, you know, all these disciples wouldn't have been martyred for something that was a lie, right? Which I could sit here for 3 hours and knock hole after hole after hole in that, all right? But I'm a big fan of like Paul Agea's minimal witness hypothesis, which is that, you know, if we want to look at where did the movement of Christianity come from, the movement of Jesus, we could say, well, you know, Christians would say, well, it came from the fact that he died and was resurrected and everyone was in awe. That would be their answer, right? I think that Paul Agea's hypothesis is
minimal witnesses hypothesis.
I'm sorry?
Minimal witnesses hypothesis.
Yes, the minimal witness. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that is a very good job of explaining how this very powerful movement could have come out of someone not being resurrected, but someone who did have followers who were very much cared about the fact that their leader had just been killed, right? But now, if we go even further back from that, and we say, well, but what if there wasn't someone who got crucified, and there wasn't followers of him, and that this is all truly made up? That is, for me, where I personally find it harder to buy into this idea that this entire worldwide religion could have taken root and spread if there wasn't at least a core group of people who really believed in this dude and wanted so badly to believe that their life, 3 years of their life, hadn't been wasted following this guy around, right?
Yeah. understand, but at the same time, we have examples of stuff like this rising from nowhere, basically. Usually, it's like government control things. I'm talking about USSR right now, because during the World War II, USSR was manufacturing a lot of the stories about like people who like did 3 plans in one like 5-year period or something like this, and it was completely manufactured stories. These people never existed, but it was planted in a like media zone, whatever, basically, and people started to believe that like it's possible, and we have these workers who work like really well and stuff, so we need to work harder because we're not as good, but we need to help our country and stuff. It can be kind of the same, but on a smaller level, because if you remember, first followers of Christianity was basically like people from like the lowest lows of the society.
Okay, so I'm enjoying this thread. So I just want to challenge you on it because I'm interested in where you would take this. So if we assume that, then I assume you're not telling me that you think that the Roman government would be involved in fostering this.
No.
I'm assuming you don't believe that the Judean
Not until Alexander.
Sub-government.
Was it Alexander or who took the as a Christian? Christian as a
Alexander
government?
died long before. I think you're probably thinking of Constantine.
Yeah, Constantine.
Yeah. Alexander was dead long before Jesus
Yeah,
came on
yeah.
the scene, but
His widowed mother joined Christianity, so
right.
Constantine was not even Christian himself. He believed in the sun god.
But then the question I would have for you is, what group was it? Because you drew an analogy to the USSR. So
Yeah.
what powerful group would it be that would have forwarded this? I don't want to call it conspiracy. They would have forwarded this legend. Okay.
Yeah, but I don't think it needs to be a powerful group because they didn't really have power until they basically recruited the mother of the Constantine and he made it the state religion.
Right, but that was a long time later. You're talking about 450 years later.
Yeah, but they basically what they were doing, they were like a really small Mormons or something. They were just like recruiting people and like taking some like money from them, like donations and stuff, saying that the end is near and stuff like this. Like you probably can imagine how it can work as a like small cult trying to survive. And then they're just like getting a couple big whales.
I don't think the record of Christianity spread though fits that. In other words, don't get me wrong. The adoption of Christianity by Constantine was a massive coup for the religion, and it absolutely cemented it in Western theology for all time up to today, right? But I'm not saying, I don't know if this is what you were saying or not, so I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think it would be erroneous to claim that Christianity was this really tiny cult that just barely hung on for 450 years until suddenly it got adopted by the mother of Constantine, and then boom, it became the state religion, and then boom, it blossomed everywhere. Like I don't think that's accurate.
They might
all.
not be like really small. It wasn't like 10 people, but imagine if like all the like widows and like all, I don't know how they called in English, like people with who basically was made fun of. Like ugly people and stuff, but it's not ugly. It's in Russian they called close to ugly, but I don't know how they called in English. But it's basically like people who like sick and stuff, and they can't work and shit.
Like outcasts.
Yeah, like all the outcasts and stuff. Like imagine if like the more and more of all of your lowest lows of your society is getting slowly converted to Christianity over time, and it's like
early
even some normal
Christianity
people
did not spread through the lower ranks. Early Christianity spread largely through wealthy people.
No, not really. That's what's in the stories. But like that's what I'm saying. Like how, like you only need like couple whales, how they called in a gaming and like poker thing.
Sure.
Like you only need a couple whales to actually make the difference and like break the bank.
Or connectors in a social perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. So like you can imagine how like a small cult can just take some psychotic but rich man and like implant this idea of this like apocalypse and stuff, so they donate money and then cult just gets power and grows a little bit.
Well, I mean, one thing I'm taking from this conversation is that like I've spent so much of my time over the last year learning far more than I ever knew about the Hebrew Bible and the Old Testament. And it's not that I don't know anything about the New Testament, but I definitely need to, one area where I need to do a lot of learning on is with the spread of Christianity and, the time, especially after the death of Jesus in the Mediterranean, because I feel like I have objections to what you're saying, but I also am humble enough to not sit here and try to bow up on you in the call.
No, you can. And by the way, like I don't like half of the stuff that I'm saying, I'm just like talking out of my ass because
Right.
I don't have like a concrete examples that like it's just a scenario like I can imagine and it's kind of plausible. So it's not something that like could never happen.
Well,
And,
we're obviously having
especially-
friendly conversations, so it's not like I'm trying to destroy you on something or whatever. But
It would have been fun. The more interesting questions you give me, the more interesting questions I can ask later to my priest.
Well,
and
but
then
that's why
he's
I'm
gonna
saying,
be
like,
like,
I need to educate
you have
myself on
interesting
this.
questions.
But that's why I'm saying I need to educate myself on this because I would love to, like go at it with you in a friendly way and say like, okay, but what about this? But I actually don't have. All I have is general ideas in my head. Like for example, and you said this is wrong, and maybe this is wrong, but it's my understanding that in the early days of Christianity, part of the reason that it spread amongst people who were relatively wealthier is because you needed people who, first of all, who had their own places like homes and estates where they could host people because they didn't have buildings that were churches, right? You had that, and poor people weren't going to be hosting meetings at their houses, right? So you
that's
need
why-
to have people that were rich enough to have estates or houses where they could have people come in for fellowship. And then you also had to have people who were comfortable enough in their social status that they didn't care if they were going against the societal norm, right? Because
Yeah.
like for a middle class person, and I know that in the ancient Mediterranean, middle class wasn't much of a thing, right? But for a middle class person, like just say like a shopkeeper or something, you couldn't afford to be not aligned with the theological mores of the day, or mores of the day, I should say, because that could not only get you in political trouble, but it could also ruin your business, right? So you either had to be dirt poor, but the dirt poor people had no place to, actually bring people in for fellowship, or you had to be at least, maybe not super wealthy, but you had to be at least well off enough that you could have groups of people over to your house and you had room to accommodate them, and you didn't care if maybe you were flaunting societal mores. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that makes sense for sure.
Hold
But
on just a
also we
second. I'm
have
going to grab
examples
another
from
drink out of the cupboard here. I'll be
another
right back.
drink. Nice, another monster.
Exactly.
What are you talking about, chat? Is this some flat Earth conversation? I'm getting only a glimpse of it. Is it the word? Do you use it like this? I don't know.
All right.
Is there a flat Earth discussion in your chat? I think so.
It may have been launched from an hour or two ago because I was pointing out the fact that Matthew, we talked about it. Matthew didn't want to own up to the fact that he's a flat earther, and then when you look at his content, I'm like, this motherfucker is totally a flat earther.
Yeah, that happens. So what I was talking, like your point about like needing a house to gather and stuff is valid, but at the same time, we have examples from the Bible where Jesus is like preaching near the river, outside the city, like inside like small towns, like all this stuff. So they might not actually gather like in houses for a long time.
Oh, I mean, that's fair. That's fair. But I mean, keep in mind though, you're comparing the gatherings that in theory would have happened around the central figure, the cult figure, right? Which you're saying didn't exist.
Yeah, but like they are basing it. They might be saying like, oh, he did it by the river, so we're gonna do it like the same way, you know? So it's not weird that we're not gathering in the house because that's how our teacher was doing it.
Right. I just think it's hard to build a movement on that, you know?
Yeah, for sure. But like it's in the start. And also I'm not sure, but like I'm for sure I've seen it somewhere that like there's like some, how it's called, like it's not letters, it's like more official document that's saying like, oh, these Christians like gathering in the caves and stuff, like you know what I'm talking about?
Are you talking about the Dead Sea Scrolls?
I don't think so. I think it was some like Roman letters or something, but not letters. It's like kind of official reports or something like this.
Okay, I don't know.
Oh.
Another
I
thing,
wish I had some examples like ready on hand.
another thing that I would say about Jesus existing or not, and I admit this is totally anecdotal. Okay, this is not evidence, but I'm just kind of telling you a story that makes sense to me.
Hell yeah.
That when early movements start, which let's be honest, at least in the early days of Christianity, you would have to be able to define it as a cult movement, right? Even though Christians may not want to hear that today. But in the early days, it would have to be a cultic movement. Cults tend to coalesce around dynamic personalities. So, at least when they first start.
I don't know why I'm nodding. You can't see me.
It's like, yes, I can hear you nodding through the microphone. No, like, and to be fair, this is not evidence. This is not an actual empirical way to support my point. But generally speaking, if you told me that, hey, Adam, I want to start a new cult movement, maybe you call it a religious movement, but whatever, it's a cult, right? So you say like, I want to start a new belief, all right? And I don't want it to be centered around a person. I just want to create a legend out of thin air. I'd say, man, that's going to be really, really hard to do. But if you said, well, let me take another approach. I'm going to find some person, some magnetic person that people love to hear talk, and they love to hear him preach, and he's like, kind of revolutionary for his day. And maybe we can start a movement around him. I'd say, now you've got something. Now, even if that person gets killed after a few years, not only would I say that you still might have something, but I would argue maybe the fact that he was killed might help you now to carry on the tradition longer than if he had never existed in the first place.
Yeah, I understand it. Yeah, like it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But like another thing about this stuff is like, what if the guys who were like making this cult were kind of magnetic themselves, but they didn't want to be the center, so they invented the person who was like their teacher.
So that's a fair point. I will only say this. If we read the New Testament, and I'm going to be the last person to tell you that we need to take the New Testament literally, right? But if we are to try to draw some inference about the character of Paul, for example, who's considered to be the most central person in the entire burgeoning Christian religion, he feels to me like the opposite of a magnetic personality. He feels almost like the kind of guy who's going to make you wonder if this thing can really get off the ground. So my point is that...
Yeah, but like, I'm sorry to interrupt you. But,
No, you're
like,
fine. You're
that's
fine.
that's one of the things that like Christ before Jesus is always talking about, how Paul actually never existed as well.
I've heard this too. Yeah, I've heard this too. But okay, so to that point, and what I'm going to say is not evidence, but I'm just talking through it in a logical way. And this is why I've never felt really good taking the mythicist viewpoint, right? Because even though we're talking about things 2,000 years ago, and even though we obviously don't have any evidence the way that we think of modern evidence, right? I'm a huge believer in not falling down the conspiracy rabbit hole. So, you know, like if you tell me that we didn't land on the moon, even if we throw out whatever evidence we have that we did land on the moon, the biggest evidence that we landed on the moon is the size of the conspiracy it would have taken to actually cover that up, right? So why am I going down that path? It may sound like a weird red herring for me to throw out, but my point is, if I look at the birth of Christianity and how it, started and spread, there are a couple ways that we can account for it as skeptics even. One way is we can say Jesus never existed, Paul never existed, and this was all made up by a group of people like, ooh, look, we can start a new thing from scratch, which feels very conspiracy to me.
I don't like the conspiracy angle as well, but imagine how funny it would be if we find an earlier manuscript and it's just talking about a guy who, like a preacher or whatever, like apocalyptic preacher without name, without anything, and then we put it on a timeline and it's like, okay, this guy, then 20 years Mark gives his name, like Luke also supports it, then Matthew, then John, and they every generation they just add more and more things, and then we find another manuscript that before this nameless guy manuscript, and it's just talking about couple dudes who were preachers about apocalyptic thing. That would be kind of funny, and that will support how all this stuff just evolved over time with every next generation making shit up.
Oh, I think we're on the same page here. All right. So when I say that I'm not a big believer in these conspiracy theories that Paul never existed and Jesus never existed, etc., please don't take this the wrong way, because I think that the majority of what we believe is or was Jesus and or Paul is probably made up. Okay. So when I say that I think that a historical person named Jesus probably walked the ancient Levant, right? I would be the first to tell you that the actual person might have been very, very different from what we have in the Gospels, and might have said only 1/10 of what we believe is in the Gospels. All right. So,
or nothing at all.
Well, that too. So when I say that I believe in a historical Jesus, I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination that the historical Jesus that I believe in is the man to the letter who's represented in the Gospels. And
for sure. And I'm not saying you are. It's just I understand. And I understand we're basically in a hypothetical world now that we are talking about all this stuff. And it's it's just for me, I can see how it can evolve, because I've seen it in the history of my country, how this type of stuff evolved, and how even some cults formed. You probably have a lot of the stories of cults forming in America as well, some weird cults,
like the Branch Davidians,
without any connection. Yeah. So like they literally usually they don't get that far
Or Jim
as
Jones.
Christianity.
You know who Jim Jones was?
No, I don't know anything about like American cults, but
Jim
like
Jones is the guy who took his San Francisco cult down to Guyana, and that's where we get the phrase "drink the Kool-Aid" from. Because
that's the guy. I know about the Kool-Aid.
yeah, he started in San Francisco and then brought his whole
Damn.
It started off as a fairly normal Christian denomination, and then got very, very, very culty, and then he brought them all down to Guyana, and then told them all to drink the Kool-Aid when they were getting raided, and
And
they all
even
died.
forced some, all right?
What's that?
They even forced some of the people. Like
So-
some people didn't want to drink.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, I say unfortunately, like anytime there's a mass death, that's always unfortunate. But it gets even grosser because, like you said, the first news reports were like, "Oh, everyone just voluntarily drank the Kool-Aid," but then later reports, years later, come out like, "Yeah, there were probably a lot of people who were pretty much forced to drink the Kool-Aid," which is even more. Talk about taking a disgusting story and making it even more disgusting. It's horrible.
Christian love, am I right?
Yeah. So I want to show you something here on screen because I did a video about this, like, I don't know, 6 months ago or something. And I know you and I are on the same page. We're not arguing over this, but when I say that my idea of the historical Jesus is not applicable to what's in the Gospels at all, I did a whole video where I talked about how when you look at the number of quotes that are attributed to Jesus in the New Testament, right? And it's not just one or two quotes. There are hundreds of quotes attributed to Jesus in the four Gospels. And at first, that may not sound really strange, especially to Christians, right? Because you might think, well, yeah, Jesus said and did a lot of things during his life, so of course we have a lot of quotes from him. But here's the problem.
Yeah, for sure.
The earliest gospel was Mark, and although most people date Mark to being after the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE, the earliest estimate I could find for the writing of Mark was 66 CE, which is probably wrong, but I was trying to find the earliest estimate just so I could, try to be as forgiving as possible. And the latest estimate, and the latest estimate for the death of Jesus is from 33 CE. So that means that if we take the latest estimate from his death of 33 CE and the earliest estimate for the writing of Mark, which is 66 CE, that means at a minimum, the first gospel wasn't written until 33 years after he was dead, okay? Which means that all the other gospels, of course, came later than 33 years. And I'm not going to sit here and pull them up in detail on screen, but I'm just going to scroll through them. I did this in the video that I did like 6 months ago. I actually had them scrolling behind me the whole time I was doing the video, right? These are the quotes from Jesus from the Gospels. And this document is really cool because it doesn't have the times when the Gospels give you the same quote over and over. It doesn't have the repeats in here. So each one of these that I'm scrolling through are supposedly unique quotes of Jesus from the four Gospels that were each one written at a minimum 33 years after his death, and some of them may have been as late as 40 or like 50 or 50 plus years after his death. So here's the question I would ask you. If I said to you, Anka, you and I talked 10 years ago, and we had a conversation, and maybe it was a really impactful conversation on your life. You might be able to remember the topic that we talked about. But can you actually remember my quotes from that conversation, word for word, from 10 years ago?
I would not remember what we talked, like your words from probably like 20 minutes ago.
That was going to be the next thing I was going to say, is that even if
Yeah.
we said, screw 10 years ago, let me ask you, like if I had a recording in my mind of what we talked about 10 minutes ago, if I said, Anka, please quote for me back something I said to you 10 minutes ago, you might, again, be able to tell me the spirit of what we talked about.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't be able to quote word for word. But look at all these quotes that are scrolling past
and
on the screen.
also the different language as well.
Exactly, because he spoke Aramaic. All four gospel writers probably knew some Aramaic, but they were all writing in Koine Greek, you know? And we're supposed to believe that these aren't just, it would be one thing if it was like a 3-word phrase, right? Because sometimes you have a phrase that's common to you, right?
Or
and
like
so-
really good phrase, like I am in the Father and the Father and in me.
Right. Okay, so if he said that and they quoted it later, I'd say, okay, you maybe you could remember that. But look at like the one on screen right now. That's why I tell you don't worry about life, about what to eat, or about what clothes you should wear. Life is about more than food and the body, blah, 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 blah. Like there's no way that any reasonable person could actually remember all this shit from decades later. Now, that being said, I also know the Christian apologetic around this, right? The Christian apologetic is like, well, but they were inspired by the Holy Spirit, right? This is divinely inspired to write the Gospels. And I'd say, fine. Then if this is
Why are
inspired,
they different then?
if this is inspired by the Holy Spirit, then why did the Holy Spirit have to wait for the first gospel to be written at least 33 years after he was dead? And then why does the Holy Spirit need to have 4 different people write 4 different versions of what he did if this is all coming directly from the Holy Spirit? Why couldn't the Holy Spirit,
With
a month after
sometimes
he died...
contradictory information.
What's that?
With sometimes contradictory information as well.
Right. If it's from the Holy Spirit, you would expect, like, I don't know, a month after he died or whatever, for one of the disciples, one of the apostles, to have, like, received the Holy Spirit and, like, holy shit, you know, I sat down over the last month because the Holy Spirit inspired me, and here's the whole story of Jesus right here. That would sound like something that would come from the Holy Spirit. Not 4 different versions of a gospel that have these incredibly, insanely long quotes from Jesus that they couldn't have possibly remembered, that are all written in 4 different, sometimes contradictory stories, the earliest of which was at a minimum 33 years after his death. That makes no fucking sense whatsoever.
And also, there is a good question in the chat. You probably know about it more than I do, because I don't know much about the Q source.
So yeah, let me pull that up here. So Amasaurus says, what about Q source and other material we lost? There's no minimum. We just only have evidence from 60 AD. So I will say this, whether or not there is a Q source is, as far as I understand, and I'm not a scholar, okay, but as far as I understand, the mere question of the Q source alone is currently at least up for some debate. I'm not saying that there's not a Q source, but I'm saying that originally, the whole reason that we assume there was a Q source is because we have Mark, which was the first gospel, right? And then we have Matthew, which copies something like, it's like 80% or 85% of Matthew is copied word for word from Mark. And then we have Luke, which is also hugely copied from Mark, which is why these 3 gospels are called the synoptics. So because you have these 3 gospels, and then John is reasonably its own unique creation. It's not called one of the synoptics. So because these 3 are so similar, it has been surmised that maybe all of them, including Mark, copied from a central source, which was Q, which still might be true. But as far as what I understand right now...
and the Q source was about a nameless man.
Right. Well, in
We go full circle.
the idea is this, that before there was any official gospel, which, you know, the first one was Mark, right? Before there was any official gospel, there was probably this collection of quotes and inspirational words that were attributed to Jesus, that were being passed around from one one of the early, church groups to the other, right? The proto church groups. So that early shared source is what some scholars have surmised would be called Q. And then they assume that Mark, being the first gospel written, was written from Q. And then if you assume then that Matthew and Luke, well, you don't have to assume, because we know that Matthew and Luke share such huge percentages of their text with Mark. You can assume that either they copied from Mark, or you can assume that there was a central source that even Mark copied from. And from what I've heard, and don't quote me on this, but from what I've heard, the whole existence of Q now is starting to be questioned in some scholarly circles. It's not been thrown out. I think that there are some scholars who absolutely say they think there was a Q source, but I think other people are saying, yeah, it's a stretch to say if Q existed. They can't say it definitively.
Likes this theory or hypothesis of a Q source.
So, I'm sorry, say that again.
I think Bart Ehrman kind of likes this Q source hypothesis. He talks about it a lot.
Yeah, he might. And then, so Demented Engineer says, so Q source is closely tied to Mark. Well, again, Demented Engineer, it depends on how you want to. It depends on how you want to surmise the textual heritage. We know, because you can actually look at the text and compare them, that Matthew is hugely copied from Mark. That's not even up for debate, because you can just look at the text and you could say, wow, there's such a huge exact word for word similarity between these two texts that they couldn't have been written independently. So clearly Matthew was aware of Mark and almost certainly copied from Mark. And we can say the same thing about Luke. The question then is, was Mark an original tale, or was Mark itself drawing from some, general tradition in the early church groups about what were the words of Jesus? So the idea there with Q is that presumably, because Mark wasn't written until at the earliest, at least 33 years after the death of Jesus. And most likely we're talking more like closer to 40 years after the death of Jesus, right? So if Mark was the first official gospel, and all of these three synoptic gospels seem to be copying from each other, then is it reasonable to think that there was a proto version that the early churches were passing around? Because the idea that the first version of all of these quotes from Jesus didn't come out until 40 years after his death sounds unlikely. It's more likely that the early proto churches already had these proto-gospels or whatever, writings that they were compiling about things that they thought that Jesus said, or legends that they had attributed to Jesus. And this unnamed early version is called Q. Whether Q actually existed is up for some scholarly debate, right?
We might never find out if Q is real or not.
Probably not, because unless you actually found a version of Q, like how do you actually, prove that otherwise? I mean, they do, to be fair, the people that get into this really, really deeply on the scholarly side, they do some really crazy stuff where they try to really break down textual analysis about, and this is how they infer. So it's similar to the analysis that's done for the Pentateuch, right? Because there are the four sources that we think, the documentary hypothesis of the four sources that we think actually built the Pentateuch. But even that is up for some scholarly debate. But the way that they determine that is because they look at the way certain language is used. They look at similarities between texts and where it differs. So then, even though it's considered to be one writing, being the 5 books of the Pentateuch is one writing, they realize, okay, this isn't one author. They can hear or identify 4 different voices in the Pentateuch. So it's the same logic, the same scholarly or textual logic that they use to try to infer that there must have been an earlier version of the Gospels that we're calling Q, but they don't actually know it. And like you said, unless they find some version of Q, they probably never will know it. It's all conjecture by definition.
And also Q should be like pretty early, like really early after Jesus' death, or like just couple years at least, to be like a good source to support like any claims that like he actually said anything. I think even like couple years is kind of stretching it.
So I think I understand what you're saying. So like if we're going to assume that these quotes are real, then yeah, I think it's logical to say that unless we're just going to assume that the Holy Spirit came down and, you know, moved everyone's hand. But if we're going to assume that these are humans writing things the way that humans write them, then the only way that you can assume that any of these quotes are logical is that they were written very soon during his life or after his death, right? Because like we said, how much can you quote from the beginning of
probably
the conversation?
Even during his life would be better. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So even a few years later, pretty much makes
it's
it
already a
impossible.
problem. Yeah.
Yeah. So
there was a boy with a paper and pencil going like with Jesus and writing everything down.
Right. So if you told me, I never thought about this when I was younger, because I would read the Gospels.
Why would you?
Right, and I'd think, well, this is what Jesus said. But now that I'm older, if you had told me, look, here's the Chronicles of Jesus, and it's like Jesus went here and did this, and then he talked to these people and did this, and then he did these acts, and then he camped over here, and then every once in a while you interjected a little known quote from Jesus, a short known quote, that would feel like something that would be historically feasible, right? Because
kind of.
Somebody may have been able to have recorded, even if we don't have the original recordings, of like, here's where he went. He went to Capernaum. He went to Galilee. He went to Jerusalem, and then he did these things. Like, okay, so we write down all of his events. This is what he did on a rough timeline. And then if he was known for saying certain very well-known phrases, every once in a while you might be able to interject a well-known phrase that he said. But when you look at the actual Gospels, and they are replete with long, detailed quotes from Jesus, I never thought about this until like a year ago. Like, this to me is one of the most damning aspects of the supposed historical accuracy of the Gospels. Because if you gave me all of these chronicles of what Jesus did, I'd say, okay, maybe we know what he did and where he went. Maybe we know he went to this village, he did this action, because these are things that are easy to write down and put into a chronicle later. But if you're going to tell me, no, these are all the incredibly long quotes from him, come on, dude. There's no way that we know this long quote that he said, this long parable that he told us. Like, that makes no sense. That literally flies in the face of how any human being remembers things and tells stories, over time. It doesn't work that way.
How many of them they misheard and they didn't put a retort into them?
Exactly. Yeah. So if this was actual humans, if these were his actual words, every once in a while there would be a really bad slur that he didn't actually say.
At least couple times, like
Yeah,
with this amount of like, and Jesus said the N-word? What?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I didn't know the N-word existed back then, but somehow it got stuck into the middle of
Like
his
I don't know. Like I don't know what this language is. I don't know what it means, but Jesus said this.
Yeah, exactly. It would make no sense. This was actually one of the this was one of the moments.
And if also like talking about like Holy Spirit, like beating the dead horse at the it's like, okay, if Holy Spirit guided them to like write it down in a different language, why Holy Spirit never guides any translators in the modern day to translate it to the new language with like a exact like words that they should use?
Bingo.
Like, God just doesn't care about it anymore. Like,
Right. All he
like
cared
that's
about
enough?
was the original Hebrew, or I'm sorry, in this case, the original Koine Greek New Testament version. And then after that, he said, y'all are on your own. I don't care anymore. That doesn't make any sense. I'm pulling this up just because I know I already told
We
you
would
guys.
have at least one translation that would be the only one version, and the other versions would be perversions.
Well,
Wait a second. We
also,
have KJV.
I brought this up before that, why is it that if this is the most important thing for all of us to understand God's word and Jesus and all this, why do we even need a Bible? Why can't you be born having the Bible in your brain? Like maybe not at the point that you come out of the womb, because at that point you have no language, right? But as soon as you start speaking and you start learning words, you should be able to start quoting Bible verses to your mom, because that
Maybe
would
would be like too harsh of an infringement of, or how is it even a word? Like it's not free will enough for the God, so he doesn't put Bible in the minds of ours. But he at least could have made it like international language is Hebrew, for example, or Aramaic or Greek, not English, or Chinese soon.
So that would be, I think, one thing that the apologists would say. Like, oh, if you put it in your brain, then you wouldn't have any free choice. But I'm not telling you that he has to put in your brain the idea that this is right and true. But if he put in your brain, like, this is the word of God, so you could still choose to reject him, but
Yeah,
the
but that's
idea
going
that
to
we
be a
have to-
rejection at this point, so it's not really like a good free will thing.
Right.
But if he just made like a Hebrew or Aramaic or Greek, like the world languages, so everyone can understand it without translation, they just need to learn like the most popular language in the world. Like that would be kind of better. Oh, that's a funny haircut.
Well,
I'm
it's-
glad you're not wearing it anymore.
Really? Okay. I mean, it's just my own hair a little longer, but I don't know. It's kind of funny because since I've started this channel, and I'm not bitching about you or anything, but the number of comments I get on my hair at any point in time is crazy. I mean,
Dude, one of the I get like 3 or 4 comments when I started to do like videos on Russian on TikTok, were like literally on the first like 2 videos I got like 3 or 4 comments about like, oh, like what do you use to like have your hair that cool? Like, do you use any like lotions or stuff? Like, what do you use? And I was like, that's not what the channel about. Do I need to switch to like fashion stuff?
well, I will point out, I mean, my hair in this video is literally the same hair I have now. It's a little longer. That's the only difference. It's cut the same way. And I know this because I cut my own hair. But I always think this,
your hair now is a little longer on the sides, and it's a different like style that you put it in. So,
slightly
yeah.
longer, but so when I cut my hair, I just shave the sides in the back. I just take a zero razor and just shave the sides in the back. So plus, and then when I do that, sometimes after I do a video after that, I get people claim that I'm like some skinhead or something because I trim.
Yeah, you kind of look like on a
Exactly.
video, like you can see.
But you can see, like in this video, like through the whole video, I just have these pages. They're not scrolling, but they're constantly changing behind me. And you can see every time they change, I put up another thing here, the 26th page, and the 27th page. They keep changing behind me because there are page after page after page after page of these quotes from Jesus. And this is one of these things where, like, of course, I was already an atheist before I started this channel, so it's not like I needed convincing, right? But this is honestly one of those things where I never thought about this until I started doing this channel. And then I remember, months into doing this channel, I thought, wait a minute, how many actual quotes are there, like word for word quotes are there from Jesus? And then when I looked it up, it's like, it's not a few quotes, of course. It's page after page, and they're long quotes. They're long, detailed quotes. And I'm like, then I started thinking, come on, dude. Like, there is no way that makes any sense that humans could possibly remember all this shit. And like I said, if we want to give it the Holy Spirit excuse, okay, fine. But then you're telling me the Holy Spirit couldn't be bothered to interact with anyone until 40 years after the death of your God-man. Like, what?
And also remember, like, one excuse, if people would do it right now, for example, you can say, oh, it's just like they had like couple autists who was like really into this stuff, so they actually remembered every single word. But it's not possible for the time of Jesus because vaccines were not here, so there were no autists.
Well, so it's funny you bring that up, because one of the apologetics around this exact point is that they will try to tell you that because there was this, they will try to tell you that there was this Jewish or Hebrew tradition which was centered around them magically remembering. I can't say magically, like fastidiously.
No, it was oral tradition, yeah.
Right. And to be fair, there are a couple things that the apologists screw up about this. First of all, the Masoretes were very well known and very successful for solidifying means of text transmission. Before the Masoretes, they had a lot more errors in transmission whenever they would copy a text. And the Masoretes put in place a series of controls that they could use to check every time a text was copied to see whether or not it was accurate. So the Masoretes did codify the situation to make it less error prone. But the idea that Hebrew in general, or that, Hebrew scribes in general, were somehow just awesomely trained to be this incredible memory stored, vessel of information that
Just like Muslims, we know how it turns out.
Right. Exactly. It has no basis in reality. It's complete fantasy to think that we can trust everything that they copy just because they were Hebrews. Like, no, Hebrews were people.
Tradition is the most reliable. That's why we have no games that based on something you say to someone and they try to like repeat it to another person. We have no this type of games.
So I don't know if you know about the Masoretes, but the Masoretes were the ones who they were the harbingers of the process that created the Dead Sea Scrolls.
One of the tribes of Israel who had
Yeah, and they actually did a cool thing, because the Masoretes realized that scribes would make mistakes, right? And sometimes, if you weren't being careful, sometimes a small mistake would multiply itself, in the text. So what they would do is they would basically create, and I'm probably screwing this up, like a scholar could probably, put me in my place and, correct everything I'm screwing up here. But what they would do is they would look at like a bunch of text like this here, and they would say, all right, fine, the scribe copied this text. And then they would do certain essentially quality control checks. They make sure that the last word matched, that the first word matched, and then they count a certain point into the middle of the text and say, does this word match? And if you did this enough times, you didn't even have to read the whole thing to know if you had actually done a really good quality transmission, right? And, you know, like if you said, look, the 10th line and, you know, 8th word over has to be said. And if it does, and if you look at the copy and if it's not said, then you know that the guy didn't copy it well, that something got screwed up in the transmission. So they really did provide a lot of meaningful guides that helped improve the quality of transmission, but that doesn't mean that they magically memorized everything that Jesus ever said. That's a
And also if they are copying already from the text that was like written with all these quotes made up, they just gonna make a good copy of that text.
Sure, exactly. Exactly. And even if you have a perfect copy, we're kind of saying the same thing, but, you know, like if you have an original text and I make a perfect copy of it, you know, that doesn't make the original text right. So like, I've seen actually a bunch of apologists who want to point to like the Dead Sea Scrolls, and they'll say, oh, well, we know that the Bible is so dependable because the Dead Sea Scrolls were almost identical to the version that we have from 1000 CE. The problem is the Dead Sea Scrolls are still hundreds of years after the text that they were supposed to represent. So
yeah, and they're not nearly identical. There is a lot of differences.
There's a bunch of differences. A lot of the Dead Sea Scrolls are fragments. Some of the Dead Sea Scrolls are like 5 words of a chapter, and that's it. But even if they were perfect copies, okay, that's cool. But the Dead Sea Scrolls are from, what is it, like 300 BCE or something like that, 400 BCE. But some of the texts that they purport to be copying originated hundreds of years before that. So even if they are perfect copies from what we know today, that still doesn't mean that they're perfect copies from the original text that we don't have in our hands. We just have to surmise how accurate we think they are.
Yeah, and even like it would be kind of okay-ish point, still not convincing, if it was literally like everything word for word. But the problem is it's not word for word. It's like there's a lot of differences and a lot of additions in the later texts. So like it doesn't even work in this way.
So I'm assuming you followed all of the Wes Huff bullshit?
I've seen some of it, but I just like I've seen some videos on Dead Sea Scrolls themselves before the Wes Huff things. So like it's just really wild claims to make that like Dead Sea Scrolls are identical to what we have.
Yeah, so because you know Wes Huff went on Joe Rogan last year and claimed.
Yeah, the story I know it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, he claimed that they were perfectly identical. You know, that the Dead Sea Scrolls were perfectly identical to the modern version of like Isaiah, for example. And it's simply not true. I mean, to be fair, part of what was really sad about what he said is that if you're being really fair to Christians or apologists or whatever, there is an incredible fidelity between the Dead Sea Scrolls and our current versions of these texts. Okay, so it does speak very well to the textual transmission that has happened from the time of the Dead Sea Scrolls until now. But because he couldn't keep himself contained, because he couldn't be intellectually honest about it, because he just felt the need to just brag about how it was identical, it really denigrated his point. If he had just said, look, these Dead Sea Scrolls are very, very similar to today's text. You know, they're in some respects, they're nearly identical. That would have been enough, I think, to shut most people up. And it still would have made his point. But because he got way over his skis.
It's not preachy enough.
Right.
He wouldn't have a wow from Joe Rogan.
Exactly. So he had to go for the wow. And because he went for the wow, then like, you know, all these other textual scholars came out of the woodwork saying, what? Like, you're not even close to correct. You're so far from correct. And to be fair, a lot of the differences from the Dead Sea Scrolls to our versions today are semantic differences. You know, like a comma out of place. I mean, I know they didn't have commas in ancient Hebrew, but I'm saying like a lot of the changes are the equivalent of a comma being out of place, right? So they are incredibly similar in ways that should be impressive to people who are looking at ancient texts. But because he couldn't be intellectually honest about it, he made an ass out of himself. Well, let me rephrase that. He made an ass out of himself to anyone who cared about the truth. To the apologist, he became a hero. Because the apologist didn't give a shit.
It's kind of the same when people saying the New Testament is true because like Dead Sea Scrolls contain the New Testament,
Which they don't.
and which they don't, of course.
I mean, they can't. Because the Dead Sea Scrolls are from, again, let me look up the year. It's like 400, they're like from 400 years, 400 BCE. When are the scrolls dated? Okay, I'm sorry. The Dead Sea Scrolls primarily date from the 3rd century BCE to the 1st century BCE. So there are some of them that get close-ish to the time of the New Testament, but even the latest of the Dead Sea Scrolls is clearly from after, from well before the time of Jesus.
Yeah, and like if you just Google it, like any AI that like Christians like to use, gonna tell you that it's not like doesn't contain the New Testament. So what are you even talking about?
Right, exactly. Well, we've already seen where some Christians are immune to Google.
It looked like kvass.
What's that?
What was this? The bottle?
Oh, the bottle?
Yeah.
Well, I had the.
Is it just beer?
This
No,
is
another bottle.
The Svedka, and then I had some Canada Dry.
Oh,
just ginger ale.
Oh, it's ginger ale. Okay. From a side, it looked like a kvass, and I was like, "Whoa, he's drinking kvass. Nice."
Nope. No, just ginger ale, and so I have my Monster and my ginger ale and my blue raspberry vodka. So
you're just mixing some cocktails over there.
I'm crazy. I'm like
fancy,
I'm like an alchemist.
Fancy. Yeah.
I'm an atheist alchemist up here.
That's good. Yeah. So yeah, just believers just make like moderate claims at least, and you will be better because in the eyes of a lot of the atheists or just like non-believers, you will seem as a more honest person. That's it.
I agree with you, but the problem is that in the apologist space, you're actually rewarded for making more unbelievable and audacious claims.
Yeah, I understand. And it's kind of sad because it's just not helping them.
Yeah, but like
it's helping us though.
I consume a lot of content like from Kip Davis, for example, and Josh Bowen, and I don't think that those guys are unreasonable, even though they're not Christians. I think that if you make reasonable claims, they will acknowledge those reasonable claims. The problem is that the Christian apologist can't be bothered to make reasonable claims. They have to make very over-the-top claims to appease their base, It's
but
like,
then it bites them in the ass because some people will believe that Christianity is true because Dead Sea Scrolls are identical to what we have now, and then they're going to learn that they are not identical, and they're going to leave the cult.
It only bites. So The sad part about apologetics is this: it only bites them in the ass with people who are already reasonably minded. But for those people who wanted to believe the most extreme Christian story, it actually benefits them. I'll give you an example of this. Kip Davis and Josh Bowen spent a lot of time dismantling the bullshit apologist claims around slavery. Okay? But the simple fact is that if you want to be a Christian apologist and if you want to get the biggest audience that you can for your Christian apologist content, it's not in your best interest to have a reasonable discussion about what the Bible really says about slavery. Instead, if you're an apologist, your best answer in terms of appeasing your base is to get on your live stream or your YouTube videos and say, no, the Bible doesn't endorse slavery in any way, shape, or form. And just hold to that position no matter how illogical it sounds. That is the way that actually gets you the most views, the most likes, the most comments, the most shares on your apologist content. Because the Christians who are eating up this apologist content, they don't want to hear someone giving a reasoned discussion about, well, listen, yeah, we can sit here today and say that God doesn't approve slavery, but here's the facts of what the Old Testament says. And they don't want to hear a true, honest discussion about what's in the Old and New Testament about slavery. They just want to hear someone who will make them feel good and say the Bible doesn't support slavery, and then shut the book on it.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. But at least we have people like you in some of your videos, and Mindshift, and sometimes Myth Vision, who are pretty soft into dealing with this type of people, so they might have a chance to leave the cult.
Mindshift is awesome. I think he's great. I'd love to meet him one day. I think he's a cool content creator.
He's really nice, yeah. I wish he would go into like a little bit more depth sometimes, but I understand he will get less views, so it's yeah.
Yeah, everyone has their niche as far as how much detail they want to go into, and also how much detail they're comfortable going into in terms of their background. I mean, I'm very comfortable talking with anyone about what's actually in the Bible. Now, as soon as you get into biblical historical stuff and, Hebrew analysis and Aramaic analysis and Koine Greek analysis, I'll be the first one to admit to you that I don't know that stuff. I mean, I can't read.
You're just going to give them the link to the Justin?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, go hit up Justin. He can answer that,
Yeah.
Well, I think I'm going to pack up here.
I just realized that you have red glasses today, not blue glasses. I feel a little bit dumb that I just realized it.
I have a whole like wall of glasses. So dozens, yes,
So
dozens
cool.
of different glasses for different things.
For different shorts, you're picking up shorts and glasses in front of the mirror, and you're like, oh, this looks better.
So my fetishes, if you want to call them that, are glasses, shirts, and custom Vans.
Custom Vans. Ooh, interesting.
Yes. So my wife's like, they turn you on? Like, no, I didn't mean fetish as in they turn me on, but I mean fetish as far as like I spend way too much time worried about the custom Vans that I purchased and how many I have in the closet ready to go, etc. So you can actually make your own custom Vans online. Let me find it here. So These are my custom Vans.
Ooh.
I don't know how many pairs are there. There's 2,
At least
4,
two.
6, 8, 10, 12, 14. There's 16 pairs of custom Vans there, and I have other ones in the closet. So, and you can
That's
get on
insane.
Vans.com and you can make these, and I don't know if you noticed, but you see how they're like offset. No matter how much I make them bigger.
Yeah, I see it. Yeah.
So, and those are the glasses. The glasses
Ooh.
there. So those are my sunglasses and my reading glasses. Very many different colors.
That's so cool.
So I spend
And then
way too much.
believers have an audacity to say that atheist has no meaning in the life. Like, look at this stuff.
Yes, exactly. Of course, I know exactly how that would play out. Like, oh, your meaning comes from your custom Vans. You know, like that would be the argument. they
No,
would
from
give
all
you.
the colors in my life.
Yeah, but if you get on,
From all the joy that I see in the people where I walk near them and they see me and my colors and they think, what a cool guy he is. He's brightening my day.
Exactly. So that's those are the things I obsess about way too much.
That's a good thing to be obsessed about.
I mean, you know, it works, and I can afford them, so it's a little pleasure I take out of life to have different customized
Later,
shoes.
when Israel and Masons and other people gonna actually write you a check for what you're doing because they're late on payment, you're gonna make a collection of other colorful vans. It's gonna be like a car vans, you know, like minivans.
Exactly. Yep. All right, so I'm about to shut this down. Demented Engineer saying later, guys. So thank you for being here, Demented Engineer. Anka, it's been good talking with you.
As always. I abuse a lot of your time, and I'm sorry for it. But I hope that some believer is gonna join sometimes and say to me, "Anka, fuck off. I wanna debate Skepticus." That's not your time to talk to him and have a good time.
That's fair. I mean, we had Matthew was lined up again to not talk tonight, but like I said, I was like, no, we ain't doing Matthew tonight. We're not doing that. So
Not every night. Like,
no,
you need to have some good conversations as well.
exactly. I mean, I need to be able to talk to someone who actually will, you know, at least understand or agree on basic definitional facts. You know.
Yeah.
But I've
And
appreciated it.
I hope
I'll
you're
talk to
gonna.
you soon.
I hope you. Oh.
I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
No, no, I cut you off, but I was saying, I kind of wanted you to make a Discord so all the people who are in the chat right now can hang out and like how we can all do it, and it would be kind of fun, and we also can do like reading clubs maybe because it seems like some people are really reading a lot of the cool books here, so they can exchange and stuff.
I agree with that. So I think I'll take that as like my homework thing for the next week. I'm not going to say I'm going to have it.
Yay.
I'm not going to say I'll have it before the next regular live stream on Tuesday, but we can definitely set up a Discord. So I'll get that set up, and we'll go from there.
That's really cool.
All right. Thank you, brother.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, it's been a good night. I hope you all enjoyed the impromptu live stream. And Tuesday, starting at 5 o'clock Central, we will be going. And until then, everyone have a good night. And go fuck with some Christians. No, I'm just kidding. Don't do that. But it's fun to say anyway.